Good evening. I'd like to call the September meeting of the Cranston City Council to order. Clerk, please take the roll. Present. Here. Present. Here. Present. 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 Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Under public acknowledgments and commendations, first we have the Cranston Cares Initiative, Councilman Brady.
Thank you, Council President. Today we're going to honor a nice gentleman that has a remarkable resume, and for someone that does a lot with the homeless, myself a lot, with the Rhode Island Dream Center, Nicholas has done it at a far younger age and has a far greater resume than myself. Is Mrs. Ranger present today? Okay. So I'm going to read this, but she's going to be representing Nicholas is away at college. But let it be known that the City of Cranston and the City Council hereby issues this congratulatory citation to Nicholas Langer. He is a college student and a social entrepreneur. Nicholas Langer is a junior at NYU's Stern School of Business, co-concentrating in marketing and management with a minor in social entrepreneurship. One of his passions is to change the state of poverty by opening up opportunities for underprivileged children. In 2010, he launched Gotta Have Soul Foundation, a nonprofit that donated new shoes to over 95,000 homeless and vulnerable children nationwide, including 14,000 children throughout the state of Rhode Island. Nicholas has engaged in middle and high school students throughout the country who run Gotta Have Soul clubs in the area, engaging 7,500 of their peers in service. He has funded college scholarships, enabling 15 disadvantaged students to attend college. Recognizing that the key to eliminating poverty starts with education, he recently launched a college ambassador program that teaches a specific curriculum to homeless children, giving them the social and emotional skills they need in order to succeed in school. Nicholas is recognized speaker in youth philanthropy, having addressed thousands in conferences and special events. Amongst numerous organizations to support his endeavors, he has been recognized as a CNN hero, Jefferson Awards for Public Service honoree, a Hasbro Community Action Hero, and a Muhammad Ali humanitarian. In his spare time, Nicholas enjoys playing tennis and developing philanthropic programs for his fraternity and co-chairing NYU's nationally recognized entrepreneur. The Cranston City Council wishes to express their hope and best wishes for his continuing good health and good fortune and for his future endeavors, and we also would like to thank him for all he does as a Cranstonian.
Thank you. You raised a very good son. We all should live up to his ideals. Second, we have recognition of Finance Director Strom and his department as the recipient of the GFOA Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting Award from the Government Finance Offices Association. Director Muskin, do you have this one?
Council President, if I may, sir, that was introduced by me.
Thank you, Director. Councilman McCauley.
I wanted to just recognize this achievement that goes unnoticed year after year by Director Strom, Mr. Igo, and also Chief Financial Officer Balducci for their recent award on from the Government Financial Officers Association Award for Financial Reporting. Cynics may say, well, this is just them doing their job, but I say it's them doing their job in a very, very good way. So I wanted to congratulate them. Unfortunately, they're not here because they're receiving the award tonight, but I wanted to let the public know about this. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Director Muskian?
On behalf of Director Strom, I'd like to extend my thanks for that recognition. He works extremely hard, as you all know. He works very well, I think, with the council. He works both sides of the House. It doesn't matter. It's always in the best interest of the city with Director Strom. And transparency and any questions answered are always his priority. So I very much appreciate the recognition on his behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman McCauley. Public hearings, this is limited to docketed matters. Name and address for the record, 4-minute speaking time. I don't believe there was a sign-in sheet tonight, so we will go until people don't want to speak. Good evening, Attorney Murray. Name and address for the record.
Thank you. Attorney Robert Murray, 21 Garden City Drive in Cranston. I'm here tonight to speak on behalf, in favor of ordinance 8-1803 under your Public Works Committee docket. We were before the Public Works Committee 11 days ago, and I believe you received a positive recommendation for this ordinance. I want to thank Councilman McCauley and Councilman Hopkins for sponsoring this. Just for the members of the council who were not there that evening, this is a request to grant, to allow the purchasing agent to grant an easement to the property owners at 875 Pontiac Avenue, which is the property at the corner of Pontiac Avenue and Garden City Drive. Most recently, it was the home of Bank Newport, previously Randolph Savings Bank. 10 years ago, March of 2008, the City Council passed an ordinance granting the authority to grant the easement to the property owner at that time. That came up as a result of, I believe, a title search where there's actually a strip of land along Garden City Drive, which is about 20 feet wide and about 96 feet long, that it's the space between the pavement and the property line, and there was never an easement for permission to cross over it. This area has been used by previous users and property owners for many years. You know, back to the late 50s, it was a gasoline station, and there was always access across this strip of land. But when Randolph Savings Bank, the predecessor to Bank Newport, was going there and leasing the property, this issue came up, and they came forward and requested the council to grant an easement. The City Council did give the authority at that time. However, there was a provision in that ordinance in March of 2008 which said that if the property was no longer utilized for a bank, that the easement basically was extinguished. I represent the property owner. We have a well-known medical chiropractor in the city looking to acquire this property and relocate his practice there. Because it's now come up in the title search, the question of access to the property from Garden City Drive is important. So therefore, we asked the councilman to introduce this ordinance to allow us to receive another easement, but we would ask that there not be a sunset provision in it, that it be a perpetual easement. I have copies of a sketch if needed for any members of the council, but we provided those at the Public Works Committee. So I'd ask favorable consideration of ordinance 8-1803, and I'll be available to answer any questions at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Murray. Good evening.
Hello, good evening. Rosemary Paris-Colt from 136 Patuxent Avenue, Ward 1. And I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Steve Sykos' ordinance and amendment of Title 1512 of the Code of the City of Cranston, 2005, entitled Building Code Violations, Electronic Monitoring. I am here to support Council Sykos' August proposal that all housing code violations be put online so that Cranston residents can track what is being done to maintain the homes in their neighborhoods. While property owners often think that the way they take care of their property is their own business, housing code violations do impact a whole neighborhood, its property values, and the safety and security, as well as the overall quality of life in a community. For this reason, building maintenance and safety concerns becomes the business of everyone in a neighborhood. I live at 136 Patuxent Avenue. It is a great neighborhood, but unfortunately, there are a number of properties that are in disrepair. Many residents in the neighborhood are interested in partnering with the city of Cranston for the betterment of our North Edgewood community. Our biggest concern is that there are properties that are in such a terrible state structurally that they present a serious health and safety issue, most especially to the children who live, play, and go to school at the Edgewood Highland School, also on Patuxent Avenue. Neglected properties hurt the property values of the homeowners who do contribute to neighborhood stabilization by investing in their properties as best they can. The North Edgewood neighborhood is not a fancy neighborhood. We don't pay the kind of taxes that the homes on the other side of Norwood Avenue pay, but I would hope that that would make a difference to the people who serve on this council. The residents of North Edgewood would like the Cranston City Council to pay attention to these concerns and support those of us who want to ensure that our neighborhood is safe. Take 133 Patuxent Avenue. The house hasn't been lived in for over 2 years. There are building structures on the property that are unsound and unsafe, and there is large, dangerous debris in the yard. With its proximity to Edgewood Highland School, which is right across the street, this property presents a serious safety issue for any child to wander onto it. Because of the neighborhood's concern about 133 Patuxent, we have been in touch with both the Minimum Housing Department and the Housing Court. Despite this, we still know very little about what's going on to correct the code violations. How is this property owner being held accountable? Are there fines being levied, and what are they? What is the schedule of hearings in the housing court? What is the timeline for rectifying the safety issues and cleaning up the property? Unfortunately, this one property is not the only one. What about the other buildings in the neighborhood that present the same concerns? I'd like to urge the City Council to support code enforcement and positive neighborhood development by, among other efforts, approving the posting of online electronic monitoring of code violations. The residents of North Edgewood are your allies in making code enforcement work in Cranston, but without the tools needed to help stabilize critical housing issues, we are unable to advocate to keep our neighborhood a vibrant and safe and livable place. Thank you.
Thank you. Nope, just come on up, name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm Maureen Sullivan, 62 Tucker Avenue, Cranston, well, obviously. I'm just here to support Steve, I don't have all the information, but basically I support Steve and the enforcement of the ordinance. I agree 100% with the previous speaker.
Thank you.
Jennifer Miller, 1900 Broad Street. I would like to reiterate what this lady here said about Edgewood Highland. There's a property that is directly across the street from Rhodes Elementary School, south of Norwood. This is a problem that goes everywhere. Director Muskian knows all about this particular property. I should not have to chase the Director of Administration to find out what is going on with the cleanup at this property. Have you got a status for me on the survey, the mythological survey? Yes? No?
Yeah. Okay.
The survey is done privately. I have not gotten an update on that. But as you know, we have continued to work with you on this. I mean, I just don't want the impression that we're not working with you on this, and I think I respond to you immediately.
You do. You're excellent.
We are doing our best.
The problem is with the transparency of, I have to call you to get information. And by trade, I am a database architect. What this ordinance says is a lot more work for the building inspector. There is an Article 5 of the building code says there's supposed to be a board of the Housing Review Board. Is this something that's public record?
That will be public, yes.
Will be. It's been someone with a laptop or should be able to find this. I have it on my phone. It's Article 5 of Section 15 of the Housing Code. There's supposed to be a board with civilian people appointed by the mayor who are uncompensated that should be reviewing these cases before they go to court. Is this just not a thing? I don't understand why this is such a production to get something done about this house.
That board is not active, but to be honest with you, that would slow down your process even more, because we forward them right to court after the second notice. Once we hit the deadline on the second notice, we forward them right to court. So that board actually, to be frank, might slow it down a little bit.
That's fine.
And I mean, I'm happy to work on activating it again, but I want to be careful with how we do
Where
that.
is the housing court's docket? So people like me, who I have to go to you and you say that they're going to be going on October 4th, that's fine. I can go on October 4th, but where is this listed online so these folks know when, what is it, 133 Patuxent? When that's going to, I used to live on Bayview, I'm familiar with that one.
You ask a good question about the court, and I think one of the things of confusion is housing court is not part of the building inspections department. The municipal court is a completely separate entity. And so, once it goes there, and what you did ask me last week was, is there a court docket? And can that be followed? That's completely separate from what's in this ordinance, and I actually thought that was a great question. It's sort of my next path to go down with this, because a court docket is a very public record and accessible, and it should be accessible. So I've got to find out, I don't know if the municipal court docket is anywhere online, and that would be very simple to put online.
You don't know where it is online.
No, I don't believe it is.
Resolve this
It's not
entire
online.
problem with,
Because most of the questions that you have tend to occur after inspections has done its second notice, and when it goes to court. Fines are issued by the court, not inspections. So a lot of the questions that get asked of me really aren't in my inspections department, they're under the municipal court. So you asked a great question, and I think that that's something, because it's not available, and it should be. And so you asked me that question last week, I think that came in an email. And that's sort of my next little path to go down with this, because I think that that would be a very simple solution to a lot of the problem, where you all could be aware and you could show up at court. People could show and make their presence known, you could drop a letter, you can be as active with that and have a direct influence on the judge. Remember, I have no influence on the judge. We send the case to court and we fight for you.
we do, and what I'm trying to express is that I shouldn't have to call Ken Hopkins, Steve Sykos, Pedro Avila. He's a great guy. I don't want to see the city lose somebody like that because he has extra paperwork to do.
That's the concern with the ordinance. I know we're on public hearings.
Yeah,
That's my
like
biggest concern with the ordinance. I'm going to take them off the road to have them filling out a database. When you can call or email, and the councilman can ask me at any point for an update, and I will get them to them.
But you have PHP code flying all over that website. Has anybody asked the programmer that you pay $62,000 a year if she knows how to create him an interface?
I don't believe that our system is ready to handle that, unfortunately. And that's another issue. That's another issue.
You have to.
In
2018.
You might be surprised.
No, actually, I'm not, because it's what I do for a living. But please take what I say.
We're offering you to volunteer. Take the help.
You know where to find me, Mr. Graham.
I'm not laughing at the situation, and I think she understands that I'm not laughing at her. We talk weekly through
You
email.
do, and you're awesome. You're awesome, but what happens when a new administration and everything comes around?
Understood.
Thank you for letting me take up excessive time and get my direct answers that go to court on October 4th.
Thank you, Ms. Miller.
Thank you.
Always good to see you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Name and address for the record.
Pauline DeRosa, 97 Cypress Drive.
Thank you, Pauline. Good evening.
First of all, Jen, I'm sorry that you had to push me back into my seat. Yes, you did. Good evening, Mr. President and council members. This evening I am addressing ordinance 08-1802, building code violations, electronic monitoring. We are all aware that our property values are greatly affected by a neighbor's reluctance and/or inability to maintain their home and property, And clearly, over the years, there has been a breakdown in addressing the issue of minimum housing standards and code violations. But I have to ask this question: is this potential database the answer? If the city endorses this resolution, they would need to do so with caution. If the subject of the violation is unable to maintain their property for legitimate reasons, such as illness and/or financial instability, and no other options are available to them, what steps can be taken in this situation? What recourse does the city have? Are there services or organizations available to assist in helping residents take care of their property if they are unable to do so? At the very least, the dignity and privacy of the subject should be maintained. This resolution could result in public embarrassment of those residents who are going through difficult times. Adding someone's name to a code violation database will not necessarily force them into compliance. And if the violator should be forced into a court appearance, they can simply state they have been ill, out of work, or just don't have the means to maintain their property. What takes place then? Does the city continue to pursue the violation with ongoing fines when a person has no means to pay them? To do so would seem counterproductive. Obviously, the current number of his inspectors is not adequate. So the more practical approach would be to consider hiring additional inspectors to address these violations. Inspectors need to be aggressive in maintaining consistency with the process. It really is a matter of following through on all violations and complaints. I would also suggest that any complaints of an unkept lawn not be a ticketed violation. I believe this would be time wasted. There are more serious infractions to be addressed. Additionally, when a property goes into foreclosure and ownership is transferred to a banking institution, the bank should not be exempt from maintaining that property. One property in particular is located on Capuano Avenue and was essentially abandoned for about 5 years. All windows on the house have been boarded up, the property strewn with debris, and the bulkhead partially open. I was told it had been owned by a bank. Except for the installation of a chain link fence around the property, there has been only minor changes in the building's appearance since it was sold in October of 2017. I'm concerned that it will be abandoned once again. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jim Corwin. I live at 136 Patuxent Avenue, and I am here to support the initiative to create a database so that housing violation, code violations are online. And I want to cite a case study that I actually experienced when I was running a PR agency back in the year 2000. We did some work for the Rhode Island DEM. At that point, schools in Rhode Island, about 7% of schools in Rhode Island were recycling, meaning that the students were separating recycling, the paper from the other trash. They were taken out into bins, but at the end of the day, waste management would commingle and throw everything in the trash. And so we created something called the Rhode Island Schools Recycling Program, and it was a report card, and we put it online, and we carefully outlined what the criteria were for recycling properly. And within 2 years, we took the recycling in schools from 7% to over 60%. So I know it's not an exact analogy, but I would say that the peer pressure associated with putting a violation online is highly motivating.
Thank you. Good evening. Name and address for the record, please.
Yes, my name is Carl Sherworth. I'm at 1599 Pippin Orchard Road. What brings me here this evening is in regards to Ordinance 5.44.030, has to do with Mobile Food Trucks Committee. The reason I am here is I want to work with the council president and the council members to look at drafting some additional ordinances that need to be in place. In particular, looking to restrict mobile food trucks from being parked in a residential neighborhood. The reason for that, and there's several that I'll get into, myself and some other neighbors in Western Cranston have been working with Walt Buteau over the last probably 3 to 4 months on an expose regarding this issue. So this issue will be aired. It's not very pretty, but it will be aired in a couple of weeks. And again, I was trying to get in front of this issue so that I could work with the city council so that we can review this. Currently, right now, it looks like there are many bodies that make up the mobile food truck committee, that being, the city council itself, the public works department, the transportation department, the special services, the police department, so on and so forth. I think the issue is some of the issues that the neighborhood has run into is we have an individual that has grown their business from one mobile food truck to another mobile food truck. The issue is, personally, myself and the other neighbors don't have any issue with an individual operating a mobile food truck. The issue is that when it's brought into a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood, running into a whole bunch of issues that have been sort of weighing on the entire neighborhood for the last 6-7 months. So what I'm looking to, again, work with the council on is not permitting a mobile food truck to be parked temporarily or permanently in a residential neighborhood, not to permit a mobile food truck to be licensed or considered as a commissary in a residential neighborhood, not to permit or allow a commercial food truck to allow for bread deliveries or any type of food deliveries being delivered in a residential neighborhood in order to support that mobile food truck. There's been a lot of finger pointing going on between the city of Cranston as well as the Department of Health regarding this issue. I think that this needs to be a better way to triage this particular problem. So just in terms of issues that the neighborhood has been dealing with over the last year and a half, 2 years, have been commercial food deliveries, being beef and bread, being delivered in a commercial neighborhood, and we're talking pallet-sized deliveries, 4 feet by 4 feet by 4 feet high. We're talking about 400 to 800 pounds of food being delivered in a residential neighborhood. So what's the problem with that? These deliveries are going on. First of all, they're illegal as per the Department of Health and their ordinances. The other issue is the noise associated with that. You get in a truck with an audible alarm backing up at 6:30 in the morning. By having a mobile food truck in a residential neighborhood, the hours of operation are literally from 6:30 in the morning to 2 in the morning. And that's because this particular individual is having illegal food deliveries delivered into their neighborhood, cleaning of the truck, loading and unloading of the truck, which is supposed to be done at a commissary per the DOH. We're having drivers entering into our neighborhood, dropping off their car in order to then drive these trucks in order then to return again at night around 2 o'clock in the morning. So there's a lot of noise that runs up and down from 6:30 in the morning and on. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what I'm looking to work with the council on. They're not, again, I think they're reasonable rules that we're looking to do. Basically, if we can just prevent a commercial food truck, mobile food truck, from being permanently or even temporarily parked in a residential neighborhood, all these other ancillary issues regarding illegal food deliveries going on and the noise associated with that and unknown strangers coming into our neighborhood and parking their cars and all the noise associated with that will cease and desist. And that's what I'm looking for the help on.
Mr. Sherbet, just to, I let this go a little bit, council members, because this kind of ties in a little bit to the online monitoring of complaints, because there was a complaint filed. Mr. Sherbet, I did forward your message to Director Muskie, and I will actually have her step outside with you and give you an update.
I did, yes, Council President, you're absolutely right. I did reach out to the council a couple of weeks ago. Again, this is going to air regardless. This isn't just about me. There are 56 mobile food trucks that I know, at least quote unquote, are online within the state of Rhode Island. It's great. Again, I used to work for a company and we used to do mobile food truck Fridays. Listen, they serve a purpose, they create jobs, I'm all for that. They don't belong in a residential neighborhood because there's all this other ancillary business and illegal activities going on to support that. Thank you for your time.
I do believe that she'll update you, but I do believe that they did break the law.
Thank you, Council President, I appreciate it.
Good evening, name and address for the record.
Good evening, I'm Raymond Tomaso. I live at 150 Linden Road. I'm here today to speak on behalf of in support of the ordinance revision by my councilman Steve Stikos with respect to the code enforcement and the publication of some means of tracking complaints. I'm more familiar with my particular situation, which is we have a problem with the odd bricks, 301 Warwick Avenue. It's been an ongoing problem for years and years and years. We keep complaining and nothing really seems to be done. We've been pushing recently and finally the code enforcement went out and cited them for 2 violations. Apparently they had a building, it's supposed to be a temporary structure. Well, it's been temporary for 7-8 years now. It's only supposed to be 6 months. So they finally cited them for that and for other apparently floatable objects within the Patuxent River plain. But the problem is that there's been no way to really track these violations. And the issue with respect to, just for example, the second notice of violation that just went out in September, actually that second notice of violation was issued 75 days late. So, you know, it's a situation where if we had been more on top of this, the city would have been out there 75 days ago saying, take these buildings down that you've put up that are illegal and take care of these items that are, you know, affecting the potential Patuxent River. And that's only just 2 violations. Now, there was an interesting comment that I believe it was Robin, indicated, oh, well, we don't fine the violators, we let the court do that. Well, you should look at Providence, because Providence code enforcement, they will issue a second notice of violation, which is basically a copy of the original notice of violation. They record it in the land evidence records, and pursuant to state property maintenance code, the SPMC, the state allows the city to issue fines up to $500. Providence apparently uses $50 a day per violation. So in my case, we would have had 2 violations, 45 days have already passed. That would be $4,500 that would have come into the city. Now, I as a taxpayer, I'm footing more or less this bills to have code enforcement go out there and do this when this $4,500 could have been paid by a violator into the city to use for hiring more inspectors, getting your decibel equipment and other monitoring devices up to par so that we can track these additional violations. So why are we as the taxpayers doing this when there's a mechanism in place for Providence separately and independent of their municipal court system to impose fines? And the tracking system that Steve is proposing would dovetail nicely into this to allow people to be able to say, hey, why isn't this being done? And the fines that are being imposed in Providence by code enforcement are separate and apart from the municipal court that has prosecution abilities and that type of jurisdictional ability where they can say, you know, you have to do this, otherwise you're in contempt of court. These are monetary fines. And then someone also said something about, well, what if the person is sick and can't take care of themselves? Well, you know, Providence has, you got to look to Providence. They know how to work the system. But there is a system that says, okay, number one, you can put the liens on the property. But number two is if some property is totally abandoned and no one is taking care of this, or they don't have the means to take care of this, Providence has a receivership program. They'll put the property into receivership. Providence will get a contractor in there, licensed, do the repairs. There's a lien on the property, or they end up taking the property in receivership through a Superior Court proceeding and reselling it to the general public. So, there are mechanisms available that this city should be implementing. Look to your next door neighbor, because they certainly know how to take care of their code violations and properties that are in foreclosure. I do title searches all the time. I see this mechanism on the land evidence records in Providence, and there's no reason why we can't do it here. I just have 2 copies of a sample violation, second notice of violation from the city of Providence. I'd like to give one to my councilman, if I may, and I'd like to give one to the clerk for the records. So I think that it's a useful ordinance, and we really need to do something to tighten this up, because we as neighbors, all we want is the law enforced, and we can't get it done because we don't have enough inspectors. We don't have the right testing equipment because it's not working. So here's a mechanism let's track this thing, and let's also put some teeth into this. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Name and address to the record, please.
Good evening. Robert Wilson, 114 Mayflower Drive. It's unfortunate that Robin had to step out, because her and I have had many email exchanges and phone calls to discuss what's going on. I'm here, by the way, to support my councilman, Stephen Stikos, to discuss the lack of enforcement as it relates particularly to 301 Warwick Avenue and Cranston Yard Works Incorporated. I was here to speak before a couple of months ago to have a database, to seek support for this database, to create some sort of accountability and transparency within this administration, for which I fear we're losing those things here, or it may already be lost. But the reason I'm here is because Stanley Pico and Lee Zarella went out to the Yardworks property back in April, and they witnessed some violations that were not up to code. It then took your administration, and Stanley Pico in particular, to issue the first notices back on the 13th of June. So almost a couple of months went by before they finally issued the first notice. And that's only because I was riding them constantly to do so. And they finally did, because they had to, it's the law, they have to follow the law. So then, that would bring us to July 13th. That would be 30 days. The Yardworks had 30 days to comply with the 2 items that they were cited for, floating debris and temporary structures, which Mr. Tomaso already alluded to. There are also many other violations that are in existence at this property that the city just refuses to enforce, but we'll get them enforced, I'm confident of that. So then the second notice of violation came out on July 29th, as Mr. Tomaso said, 75 days later. And I'm just curious why, when you have 30 days to come up to code, it takes 75 days for the Department of Building Inspection to cite these individuals. And as I said before, it's probably because they're overworked and they're understaffed, and all that is, I'm sure, true. But it doesn't in any way give you the ability to, it's not an excuse. Now, Robin Muxine's over there. We've spoken many, many times and had many, many emails. And if it weren't for myself and my neighbors being so upfront about this and so on top of this, nothing would be done. Absolutely nothing. So, Ramsey Loca used to be the engineer in the city of Providence. He was the building inspector, and he was an engineer. Very qualified. I'm not sure what the credentials are, Mr. Pico. I'm not sure what the credentials are of the other individuals who make up the Department of Building Inspection. But I think you need to look at it closely. And you need to hire more officials, more building officials, more inspectors. It's not just us here at 301 that have problems with 301 Warwick Avenue Yardworks. As I've learned, there are many other residents in this city, in different wards within this city, that are experiencing very similar issues, whether it be Northeastern Tree and off of Pontiac Avenue, and many others. And Yardworks Their property literally abuts our property. There is no buffer zone whatsoever. They start at 7 a.m. in the morning with the trucks beeping and banging and diesel fuel smelling and vibrations through my pillow when I sleep, if you can even sleep. I have young children that can't even play in their own backyard because we have diesel fuel smelling and banging. My son's afraid to go in his own backyard. In his own backyard, he's afraid. Because this administration just won't do their due diligence and they won't enforce these ordinances. And like I said, if we didn't just force your hand to do these things, nothing would happen. And I must say, Councilman Stakos is a great man. He's a good man. This man is going above and beyond. He is what every councilman should be like on this board. Look to him as an example. And I know he's a Democrat and the majority of the council is Republicans, and you guys can never see eye to eye because you let that get in the way. But that's not what it's about. I was told, actually, I'm not going to single out individuals, but I was told by a member of this council that I met with that he was instructed by this administration not to speak to me. And he told me who told him that. I'm not going to name names, and that's not who I am. But that's the kind of administration you have here. These are the types of individuals you have running things here. So things have to change. You need to put your Republicans and your Democrats, you need to just pocket all that and work together to find out what you can do to help us. I shouldn't have to spend my night here on Monday at 7:45 talking about Yard Works Incorporated because the city of Cranston refuses to enforce ordinances. I have better things to do, many other things I could be doing. So I support Councilman Stakos. He's done a fabulous job. And let's just get it together and do right by the people and enforce these ordinances and fine these individuals for not being up to code. Because they're zoned C5 commercial, it doesn't give them carte blanche, as I said before, to do whatever they want down there. There are noise decibel levels that they have to be in accordance with. There's so many things I could get into here. There's just not enough time. Right, the floating debris and dust and particulate matter, fugitive dust is what DEM calls it. I mean, I've done a lot of work on this. More than 4 minutes time worth that I could give to you now. So, let's get it together and let's work for the people, because I'm sure when all of you, right, I'm sure when all of you ran for council and everything else, right, help the people, for the people, this and that. Well, here's the people. We're reaching out to you. Do something about it. Enforce these ordinances. Thank you.
Director Muskin, do you want to retort any of that?
Yeah, just briefly.
Your name was mentioned 4 times.
Yeah, I would like to address the question of the administration's role and any mention of party politics on this. First of all, as any constituent in this room knows, because I've talked to you all, I don't know what your party affiliation is. I talk to everybody who comes to my desk, and I talk to everybody and email everybody. Did this administration caution people to be very careful what they said to you? Absolutely we did, because I am in possession of an email where it clearly says that a group is gathering evidence to sue the city. I have an obligation to protect all taxpayers from that while I work on your issue. And I guarantee you, if you ask the people of Yard Works, they don't like me any more than you do, because I'm dogging them pretty bad to comply, whether you believe that or not. The time in between the first notice and second notice of violation on them having trailers on that property, you know what was going on in the time in between? We hauled their rear ends into planning and made them provide plans for a new building. But the building they showed us wasn't sufficient, so we sent them away and then sent Stan out to violate them to ensure that they continue to work with us. We have an obligation to let people correct their problems.
Can I
They
say
made an
something?
effort. I let you speak. They made an effort, and they did not comply to the degree that we felt they should, so we went out and violated. We are not allowing them to operate under the C5. We force them to comply with the C5. What we cannot do, and I've repeated this to you, and you mentioned Northeast Tree, and they're under the same umbrella of a state statute. And again, I'm not going to continue on the debate because there has been representation of taking the city to court, and I have to protect that.
I've never stated that, Ms. Maxine. And I want to like you, Ms. Maxine. In fact,
I want to like you.
I liked you when we first had these discussions, but you have to realize the floating debris violation and the temporary structure violation are two separate violations. So the fact that they submitted plans about about the 40 by 50 foot building that they want to put over there, has nothing to do with the floating debris violation, so you could have sent out a second notice for that. They're separate violations altogether. So you could have sent out a second notice for the floating debris in and of itself. You didn't have to wait for them to submit plans for a new structure, they get it denied, and now you're going to send out the notice. You could have sent it for the floating debris. They're not one and the same. They're two separate violations.
Yes, they are, and you probably could have, but the reality...
Right, you could have. You didn't.
The next step for that would be court. So they're going to go to court, and they're going to say to the municipal court judge, we're in the process of working the city on major buildings on the property. We're not going to get as much leverage. If I take it to court and both of them together, I actually have more leverage. Believe me, I am not trying to allow this group to operate in any way that's adverse to your neighborhood. We are not trying to help them. We are trying to help everybody. They run a business. They have a right to run a business. I can't break state law. But I also feel that they can be much better neighbors than they are. And frankly, having them take down those trailers and forcing them to have to put up a building that our planning department is going to watch every nail and hammer that goes in there. And it has to go through a site plan process that's public.
I'm aware of the process.
You all have a lot of ways on this.
What happens if it's denied? What happens if it goes before the zoning board and it's denied?
Real quick, I think we went sideways, we went a little sideways on public hearing.
Okay, I just want to say one thing. For the record, that email that you're sitting on about us filing a lawsuit, that email's not from me, so I don't know whose email you're sitting on. I never sent that email.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. Richard Rodolph, property owner and property taxpayer at 30 Roberts Circle. I am here to support Steve Stikos in his initiative to get some transparency in this city. I came before this city in 2007 when we first discovered the problems with yard works. Now, I know many of you will say, well, that's in the previous administration. It's not our problem. Actually, it is your problem. This is an inheritance that every administration, whatever their affiliation, whatever their jurisdiction, whether national or local, is going to inherit. We require a solution on this now. We're done. We've had enough time waiting in front of various bodies, trying to get answers. In fact, I have an email that I did not get a response from in any manner from a city official. So guess what? We have some issues as far as whether there's veracity in a lot of statements here. Same thing I faced back in 2007. At this point, I really don't see much of an option here for me as a property tax owner, payer, and as well as a property owner. I guess I have to go through a financial process to see if I can get some recompense that way. Because you won't do your job. None of you will. Only Steve Stikos seems to be interested in opening up for the rest of the residents in this city some accountability. I support that. I want it now. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to clarify what we're allowed to talk about during this section of the meeting. We can talk about the bill that is before us regarding transparency of fines and violations online. I know we've gone sideways a little bit talking about yard works. That specifically is not before us this evening. Please keep your comments germane to Councilman Stikos' bill regarding transparency of claims. Thank you. Name and address for the record.
Tony Liberatore, 18 Bank Street. I'm here to speak on two items very quickly. If I approach the 4-minute limit, please let me know. Councilman Hopkins, who's a very dear friend of the Cranston Parks and Recreation Department, under council member communications, discussion on relocation of Recreation Department and Director of Athletics to the Pastori Center. The Parks and Recreation Department, as of tomorrow, will be 90% moved into the Pastori location, but there will be no room at all for the Director of Athletics from the Cranston School Department. We have 3 offices there. One office will hold my program director, principal clerk, and my general foreman. The smallest office there will be mine, and then we have a meeting room, conference room as well, where there are many meetings, and we just don't have room for another body. I have discussed this with Mr. Tradaconti, the AD of Cranston Schools, and he understands my situation, and he has no problem staying where he is at Halton School. Second thing is ordinance 9-18-04, extending the lease for the Multiple Sclerosis Dream Center. They are currently on a 2-year lease with a 3rd-year option, and they are looking for a 3-year lease with a 5-year option. I have no issue with this. They are a good tenant. They pay us $1,000 a month for 10 months, $10,000 a year, which would be more revenue into the city. Total rent of the lease, $50,000. They clean as they go. They're a great tenant, and I'd like to see this approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Anyone else to speak on docketed items? Good evening, name and address for the record.
Sure, give me 1 second. Good evening, my name is Lamis Vargas. I live at 35 Betsy Williams Drive in Cranston. I have a couple of handouts. Can I hand those out now or right after?
The clerk can get them from you and then pass
Okay,
them out.
perfect. Okay. I'm here today to testify in support of the proposed ordinance which amends Chapter 2.0. The purpose of the ordinance is to diversify city government. Although this will not take care of diversifying every department, it's certainly a start. City government should reflect the city that it serves. In many ways, city government has not caught up with growing diversity. I applaud Councilman Stichels for reaching out to a Ward 1 resident who's a lawyer and Central Falls City Solicitor Matt Jerzik in getting the diversity ordinance that Councilwoman from Central Falls, Stephanie Gonzalez, passed in 2015. In looking at that ordinance and a Providence Journal op-ed by Mayor James Siosa, there are additional components to Councilman Stichels' ordinance that this council should consider. I would like to submit both documents to the council for your consideration, which was just passed out. First, let's talk facts. The U.S. Census estimates as of July 1st, 2017, that 14% of the city's population of 81,000 is foreign-born. That equals 11,340 city residents. The same survey states that 13.3% of residents are Latinos, 5.7% are Asians, and 5.2% are African American. What have we done to establish culturally and linguistically appropriate goals, policies, and management accountability, and how are they infused throughout the city in daily planning and operations? Our diversity effort should not just focus on Spanish-speaking residents. I would urge the entire council and the law department to explore ways to include greater opportunities for Asian American and African American residents and any other ethnic group that surpasses 5% in the census. I would also encourage that we have a collaborative leadership effort and work with One Cranston to continue a dialogue about equity and about the need to not only diversify our city government at City Hall, but also to encourage the school committee and superintendent, although I understand there's two separate bodies, to work in collaboration, if not already, with local partners on diversifying our educators and administrators. Second, as Mayor Diosa's op-ed points out, it is crucial to advertise job opportunities in as many diverse places as possible. Diverse job applicants can't apply for jobs that they aren't aware of. I would encourage the council to add language to this ordinance requiring the posting and publishing of job openings in diverse languages in publication, if not happening already. Finally, I would like to applaud the fire department for bringing on their first woman in the history of the department. It's a good first step. And as we continue the important discussion about diversifying city government, we should bring our city unions to the table and seek their input as well. In summary, I ask that the City Council to vote on and pass the ordinance tonight and to once again, because it's happened before, ignite the conversation today about strengthening and passing a stronger ordinance in the near future that will recognize equity throughout the city. This includes, but is not limited to, not only race, but gender and people with disabilities. I'd also like to add, if Mr. Jim Vincent's not here, which he said he was on his way, who's an NAACP president, that he is here, that he is actually in support of this ordinance and to working with the city council and making sure that this is a start to addressing diversity, not just with Spanish speakers, but Asian Americans and African Americans, and having a diversity as city government as a whole. Thank you.
Good evening, Chief. Name and address, so I could excuse my appearance. I didn't plan on speaking. Paul Valletta, President of Cranston Firefighters. I rise today to speak about this diversity ordinance that's going in tonight. I say don't pass this one tonight because this isn't going to do anything for diversity in this city. So we've been talking about diversity in the fire department for 34 years. That's how long I've been there. And we always seem to talk about it. We never seem to do anything about it. My fear is if this passes tonight, then we won't talk about it again, and the problem won't be taken care of. Because this ordinance does nothing. First of all, I don't know if it's the intent of it, but promotions are mentioned in it. So if this were to pass tonight and promotions are part of this, then it would be a violation of the collective bargaining agreement, so the ordinance would be null and void anyways. So let's take promotions out of it for a minute. So all this ordinance says is that if you speak Spanish or 5% of the population in the city of Cranston, you get 5 points when you're hired. Well, what happens if there are 30 white guys that can speak Spanish? So that does nothing for diversity in this city. How about we sit down and maybe give points for minorities if that's how we're really going to solve the diversity problem? I don't know if that's the answer, but this ordinance does nothing. And my fear is if this passes, then the conversation stops because we think we have an ordinance that's going to fix the diversity problem. And we don't have any minorities in the fire department, and we've tried. We have made an effort with the chief to get more minorities on the department. When we have recruitment drives, which we have now, we help out the chief. We send union members with the chief. We go to different organizations to try and build up our minority applicants. In 2003, we had a mayor here who wanted to act like he cared about minority people. And he passed an ordinance that I stood up in 2003 and said would do absolutely nothing for the diversity on the fire department. And it didn't, because we have no minorities right now, and this is since 2003. And I was called a racist at that time because I got up and spoke against it. So I'll probably be called that again by someone. But this does nothing. If you really want to solve this diversity problem, let's all get in a room, all the stakeholders, the unions, the council, the administration, let's get all in a room and let's do something about it instead of talking about it like we've been talking about it for 34 years. But if we pass this tonight, I fear that that'll be the end of the conversation, and this is going to do absolutely nothing. I mean, what happens when someone comes in and checks the application that they can speak Spanish? Does the personnel director then have to give him a test of how many words a minute he can speak? Or, I mean, what's the threshold? And 5 points can mean a lot. We looked at the last test in the fire department, and the testing is so close in these when we give these tests. People that finished in the 80, 88, 89, if they'd been given 5 points, it would have dropped them to the top 10. So, as I said before, what if it was 25 white guys that check Spanish? How's that going to help diversity in this city? So I would ask you not to pass this tonight, and let's all get together and do something about it once and for all. Thank you.
Maureen Sullivan, 62 Tucker Avenue, taxpayer, property owner, 4-unit. I would like to address some of the points he just brought up. I don't believe in living in fear.
I'm sorry, you already spoke once. Our rules only state you can only speak once. If you're going to be quick, I'll allow it for a minute.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be quick.
Okay.
I worked at Risky Public Safety. What I don't understand, if they're actively seeking minorities, why is Cranston and East Providence, they're the only ones failing in recruiting minorities? If you look at any other department, and I'm not sure about the facts on this, but most departments that I know, police, fire, they manage to find minorities. So if you have to give people 5 points, yes, it's going to benefit some people that speak Spanish. And if it is a white person that speaks Spanish, fantastic, they'll be able to communicate. But when I look at my city, I see a lot of diversity, but whenever I see firefighters or whenever I see cops, they're almost always white men or white women. You know, they are getting some women. I look at you guys, look at all the white men in power. What does that say to me? Even as a white woman, you know, the city's not represented. The council doesn't represent the average person. So why does Cranston struggle with finding minorities that are qualified?
Thank you. Name that as the record, please.
My name is Sean Amato, and I'm a resident at 111 Norfolk Street. I would like to make a public comment regarding something on the docket tonight, but I'm not sure exactly the number. Regards to Norfolk Street. It's an ordinance regarding the one-way versus two-way on that street. I am one of the reasons that that ordinance was put into effect originally. I was dragged into either this room or another room like this at a very young age because I was almost slammed into by a car. So it was a one-way street specifically because my mother made a big deal out of it. And here I am, probably also wearing a hooded sweatshirt like my mom did, vouching for the same thing, having the same fight. Norfolk Street has high foot traffic. It has high foot traffic specifically from children, because Cranston East is one street away. Just for funsies, and I would like funsies to be entered into the record if at all possible, I counted from my front window at peak school time as to how many children walk down the street today. Just down Norfolk Street between approximately 1:50, which is naturally when you can get out of school early, if you can, versus about 2:30, and I counted about 47 kids. So that's a lot of foot traffic. I know that making the street two ways, again, would open it up to a lot of truck activity that would probably clip windows and mirrors off of various vehicles parked on the side of the street. I mean, it's a pretty quiet street. There's a lot of kids around. It's just kind of a concern as somebody who just moved back to Cranston after 10 years of not being here, that, you know, helped rehab a house so I could start a family, and I would like to protect my investment additionally. So I would like to kind of speak out against any changes to the one-way on Norfolk Street. Sound good?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Raymond Parado. I live at 2242 Cranston Street, and I'm here to support the making Norfolk Street a two-way street again. About 15 years ago, I received a call from the traffic engineer that Norfolk Street was on the agenda to become a one-way. I attended the meeting. I am the owner, by the way, of Walt's Roast Beef and the two properties adjoining it. Becoming a one-way street. I attended the meeting, was assured by the council that they would not do anything to hurt my business. They agreed to divide Norfolk Street with a divider giving half of the street to Walt's so that we could access we only have 15 parking spots, and 9 of our parking spots abut Norfolk Street. So they were supposed to give us access to that. But 2 months later, I see signs appear that says, "Do not enter one way." The signs went up. So after meeting with the city council again, I was informed that since there are sewer lines under the Walt's half of the street and would cost $50,000 for the project, it was abandoned. And no consideration was given to me for the damage this would cause our business. We lost $25,000 in the first 6 months that this happened. $1,000 a week in sales was lost. I was able at this time to purchase the properties at 680 and 686 Reservoir Avenue, which was the Dupree building and the Waltz building. And by eliminating the divider between the two properties, I created 5 additional parking spots. And then by leasing 686 Reservoir to tenants that didn't require much parking, I was able to use their parking lot. However, our current tenant now is a cigar bar, and he has slowly been building up his business. and to the point where he no longer have access to his parking lot because he's busy also at lunchtime with his customers. So our business suffers again, and if we close or relocate at 680 Reservoir, it'd be difficult for me to even lease that property. It's devalued. You can't access the parking lot. I mean, we've been in business there for 60 years, and when this one-way was made, he's talking about a lot of traffic going down the street. Actually, you know, our trucks who deliver to us have to come down Norfolk Street to access our restaurant because they can't drive in from Reservoir Avenue because it's a one-way. So that actually creates some traffic. And what they've done by making it a one-way is that they actually passed on the problem to the next street over, which is Wilson Street. So people still cut through. Now, like myself, if I go to Durfee's Hardware, I just go up Wilson Street. So they just transferred the problem. But meanwhile, as a businessman, I mean, what are we supposed to do? Just go out of business? And then my property's been devalued without any compensation by the city. So we're really hurting there, and we have to have this two-way street again. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Councilwoman Lee.
Hi. I'm Sarah Lee. I'm at 1330 Narragansett Boulevard. I just wanted to talk about something people were talking about a little earlier about the diversity issue. I heard from some people at the schools that there are quite a few grammar schools that don't have any teachers of color or diversity. So that is something that maybe could be looked at as well. Not just the police and fire, but and diversity benefits not just someone of color, but everyone when we're growing up and learning and about the world. So I think diversity in the schools is something that should not be overlooked. That's it. Thanks.
Good evening. Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Andy Lohmeyer. I live at 97th Drive, and I also want to speak in favor of the...
Could you hit the button that says push on the base of the microphone?
My name is Andy Lohmeyer. I live at 90 Sefton Drive, and I want to speak in favor of the diversity ordinance. This is an important issue to me, to our community. Both of my kids went through Cranston Public Schools. They were part of very diverse classes. I think they benefited from that. They played together, they studied together. I think that's a great example of how institutions should reflect the community that they're there to support and to nurture. So I would see that as an essential function of the city government and the city administration to try to reflect the community's diversity to that community. It goes to, I think, give everyone an equal stake, a belief in, the civic equality that's very important for the community to be stable and desirable to live in. So I would encourage you all to support that ordinance. It often takes deliberate action to make a change like this. It might take continued effort to implement it, in a way that works very effectively. But I hope you will support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'm going to close that section of the meeting. Thank you for everyone that spoke this evening. Moving on to resolutions. A resolution calling upon the governor of the state of Rhode Island to issue an apology to the citizens of Cranston and its elected officials and retract the campaign advertising falsely characterizing Cranston as a blighted and distressed community. Sponsored by Councilman Favecchio, Councilman Hopkins, co-sponsored by Council President Farina. I'll take a motion to approve. I have a motion to approve. Is there a second? I have a second under discussion. Council Vice President.
Thank you, Council President. As everyone knows, the governor has been publishing campaign ads that are, I guess, supposed to be attacking her opponent, but they really attack the city as a whole. And some of the most egregious parts of those campaign ads reflected, as you've seen today, the Edgewood Highland School depicted as being indicative of rundown schools. That was a result of a water main break, this equipment of Providence water supply that happened on maybe the coldest day of the year. That's not what our schools look like, and I think it's an affront to the school department and the school committee. In addition, the distressed city, we have, there were pictures of properties that lie in Providence and not in Cranston in some of the ads. It's, really misleading. I think it's an affront to all of us. We pay decent taxes to try to keep this community looking nice, and our property values are very high right now. Property sells very quickly. So I don't think we're a distressed city at all. In fact, I even checked with Director Strom on the finances, and we've had so little in tax rate increases, that it's negligible. In fact, with the $2.29 decrease last year, we probably have only gone up 1% in 8 or 9 years. So I think that it's incumbent upon candidates and elected officials to at least report their findings accurately. We have the highest surplus of any city. We have $20.4 million in surplus. We have much higher bond ratings than we've ever had. So I think if we're in bad shape, then the rest of the communities that the governor governs are in much worse shape. So I think that really she should apologize for using those kind of campaign ads, and especially the Edgewood Highlands one and the areas in Silver Lake that did not lie in the city of Cranston. They lied in the city of Providence. And so I would just, obviously we don't know whether we'll get an apology, but at least maybe those ads can be pulled.
Thank you, Council Vice President. Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd also like to talk about the same topic. In one particular commercial, the governor talks about layoffs at our schools and how many teachers have been laid off. I called the superintendent and asked her specifically what the numbers were. And she said that those numbers do not accurately reflect what happens. By state law, based on the number of students in schools, and I worked there for 27 years, so I know exactly how the system works, the layoff notices are given to teachers based on projected number of students coming in the next year. Those are called FTEs, or full-time employees in the school department. Well, the commercial comes out and says that X number of teachers were laid off, but what it doesn't state, and what it should say, is that following the state law, most, if not all of them, were hired back. In reality, we actually have a shortage of teachers in areas of ESL, certain languages that we can't hire teachers, most recently a tech ed teacher for the charter school. So again, I'm following up on Councilman Favicchio's comments, but the educational side of that commercial is completely wrong, and I'm highly offended by the commercial, and I think it should be taken down.
Thank you, Councilman. Any further discussion on this resolution? You may.
I just want to thank the council for this, and campaigns aside, and a couple of my directors are here, and they know that every Tuesday morning I hold a city staff meeting, and I say, we run a city. We do not run a campaign from City Hall, and there are directors that sit in there every week and listen to me. And we take great pride in the city that we run and that we work side by side with the council on. We did not have 9 tax increases. We've worked side by side with this council, with other members on and off the councils, to ensure that we did not have those things. So I really appreciate the council doing this, because we run a city. Frankly, I don't deal with the campaign side. All I care about is that we do our job here for the people of Cranston, and we can go back and forth, and we're supposed to go back and forth like we do. That's what we do. And I think that images of our city that even aren't images of our city that show blight are really very, very unfair to the people who work so hard. We have an amazing staff. and any implication that they are not doing their best to keep this city nice. And we, as I said, we have individual issues here and there, but when you consider 80,000 people and 50,000 households, I really am very proud of the work that we do and really hate when the city gets dragged in like a political football. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Councilman Brady.
I share the sentiment of Mr. Hopkins and Mr. Vecchio, and I was wondering if I could be added as a co-sponsor.
Sure. Councilman Stichels.
Thank you. I won't be voting for this resolution. I agree with many of the criticisms that were made of the commercials, particularly what Councilman Hopkins said about the layoffs of teachers, which I participated in, and actually was an advocate for doing that so that the school department would have options when the final budget was decided upon. But I don't think the City Council is in a position to start judging political commercials. I personally have been offended by Mayor Fung's commercials that imply that immigrants are the cause of crime. And I'm sure there will be many other commercials on both sides that are slanting the truth and twisting it. So unless we have some kind of resolution that criticizes all campaign advertising, which is false, I can't support this resolution.
Councilman Laney.
I also, excuse me, can't support this resolution. If I remember correctly, I put in a resolution for 10 months. No guns in schools. This council rejected it for 10 straight months. Now we want to play politics with this. All political advertising is political advertising, and all of it is slanted one way or the other. I don't justify this commercial, but I don't think it belongs in a resolution to make our city and our mayor look good. It's just another political ad by another group supporting their particular point of view.
Councilman Arquette.
Thank you, Council President. I will not be supporting this resolution. I just think it's politically motivated. I do love Cranston. I think we've been on the council 10 years. We've brought Cranston a long way. But I just think it's just politically motivated. What I didn't like was the governance commercial showing photographs of Pecasset Avenue, which is Providence, which I thought was good taste, and maybe Councilman Iglesias might want an apology from the governor. But I do think this resolution is politically motivated. I'll be voting no.
Councilman Paplowskis.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I've gone back and forth on this. I don't think we need a resolution that calls out and says that Cranston is a great city. I think we all know Cranston is a great city. But I will support my colleagues and people that sponsored it, and I will vote for this.
Council Vice President Vecchio.
Just a follow-up for Councilman Arquette. This resulted basically from Councilman Hopkins and I sitting down and talking about all the complaints we had gotten about the commercial from citizens in Cranston. Because this ad was a direct attack on Cranston as a way of getting to the mayor, I guess. And none of it, and that's where it came from. We sat down and discussed it. I've had a lot of people stop while I'm in my yard, stop by, and some of them making sarcastic jokes about the ad, saying that maybe I should leave Cranston because it's so distressed and falling apart that maybe I should leave. And it was all in jest, but a lot of comments came into us. Nothing, we never spoke to the mayor about it. This was just simply something that we discussed with a lot of constituents, and they were upset about it, and they still are. It's one thing to have a political ad, but when you attack a city, and they're also attacking us, because they're basically saying that we haven't done our job as a council, and I think that's where it diverges from what Councilman Stichels said, which is a more general issue, and it may be politically motivated, but it has nothing to do with the city of Cranston directly.
Councilman McCauley.
Thank you, Council President. I also will not be supporting this after listening to the public comment this evening. I believe there's more important issues to raise and deal with than a political ad. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Everybody spoke, so I'll say my piece on this resolution. You know, I have no issue with Governor Raimondo saying whatever she wants about Mayor Allen Fung. She can say whatever she wants about the mayor, as he is her opponent. If she wants to call his record into question in any way, shape, or form, I am all for it. And I'm all for the mayor doing the same thing to Governor Raimondo, because that is how politics works. However, when you have an ad that blatantly mislabels facts about my city, the city I love and the city I've lived in my whole life, I think you should take that ad down. She uses the flood of a school to say that school buildings are falling apart, and the flood was caused by a water main break. Facts like that in ads, you attack my city, you're attacking us. Let her attack the mayor on his record, and let him attack her on hers. Don't pull Cranston into it, and I think that's what this resolution is about. Thank you. Clerk, please take the roll.
No.
Yes.
No.
No.
No. Yes.
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 Yes. Report of committees. Council Vice President.
Okay, not
Finance Committee.
Finance, hang on 1 second. Losing my, okay. First, we have on the Finance Committee the resolution authorizing real estate tax abatements. This passed unanimously.
I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
A motion and a second under discussion. Seeing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Next, we have a resolution authorizing motor vehicle tax abatements. I recommend passage.
I entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second under discussion. Seeing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Yes.
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 Next, we have the resolution authorizing tangible tax abatements. Passed unanimously. I'd urge approval.
I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion approved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second under discussion. Seeing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Yes.
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 Yes. Moving on to Public Works, Chairman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ordinance 818-03 is an ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent to execute a grant of easement for use of city property on Garden City Drive, sponsored by Councilman McCauley and Councilman Hopkins, in the past in committee.
I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second. I have a motion and a second under discussion. Councilman Stichels.
Yes, after the hearing, I had a couple of phone conversations with Evan Kirschenbaum, the council's lawyer, about this ordinance, and after I make my comments, I'd appreciate his comments, because I'm not quite sure where we ended up. But I think I'm concerned about the granting of something of value that the city owns to a private body without going through the proper procedure that, as I read it, comes out in the city charter. What this ordinance does is it grants an easement across some land that the city owns for this business, as Mr. Murray explained. But it grants it in perpetuity, forever, and without any appraisal by the city of the value of this. And I think some people may remember when Steve Laffey was mayor, and he gave a fire truck to people in Guatemala. And there was after that, there was a lot of controversy, and I believe what happened, if I recall correctly, was that the council president, Aram Garabedian, proposed a charter amendment which basically said that if the city's going to give something away, it has to find out what the value is and then go through a process. So that's my concern about this. I don't have any problem with granting a temporary easement as the council did before, but by granting an easement in perpetuity, I think what's, as a practical matter, is we're really handing that property over to the adjacent property owner without any compensation, because there's not much we can do with that, and they have an easement. And obviously, it's of value to them because they'll be able to get cars in and out to their business from Garden City Drive. So those are my comments, and I just would hope that Mr. Kirschenbaum could give us some thoughts based on his looking at that section.
Sure. There were two sections that I came across. First is in the charter, the second is in the code. The first one is section 708 in the charter, sets forth a list of steps that the city has to take when it wants to sell property. It includes advertising, it includes appraisals, it includes the current market value of that appraisal, and it says that the sale of the property shall be made only the highest qualified bidder, and all these other conditions concerning the sale of city property. So it's clear through the charter that the sale of city property has to be with a qualified appraisal and touch the bases, in other words, according to 708. There's another section in the code which kind of touches on this, which is abandonment, which they're really not asking for, which would again be another mechanism where an appraisal would be conducted and the city could grant an abandoned street to someone for a particular fee. In this particular case, this is kind of a hybrid situation where, you know, it's not a straight sale and it's not an abandonment. I mean, I know you characterize it as a perpetual easement, and maybe it is, but the city is still the owner, the legal owner of the property. The easement only gives the tenant the right to use a particular property for the use that's always been established. It looks to me that when we first discussed this property, I thought the location was of a different nature. This location of the easement is right when you turn off Pontiac onto Garden City Drive, and it's from the sidewalk inward to where the building is faced. And I think the city would still have the right to do with, as they wanted to, that particular property. If they were to expand the street or make the street bigger or change the sidewalks, they could still do that because they're still the legal owner. I think the easement just gives the right of this particular doctor to use the property as it currently exists for the purpose of the building. So, to me, at this point in time, this is a political decision, in my opinion, not necessarily a legal one. And I don't see anything that mandates the payment of this particular easement. Coincidentally enough, on the other side, when you look at the gas station, it looks, I would bet if someone had done a title search on the other side of the property, it's probably the same condition. It looks like it was planned the same way on that property. So, you know, whether or not you think that they should buy it, I guess is a particular political reason, but I don't think they're required to do so because it's not a sale.
Thank you, Solicitor. Councilman Lanning.
Mr. Kirschenbaum, does that property have to be appraised, even though you're talking easement? Advertised and appraised, all this, according to section 7.08?
In 7.08, the closest thing I could characterize it as would be a lease or rental of real property, which does not require an appraisal, only a sale.
All right, my second question is liability. Since the city owns the property, you're allowing somebody to use access to it, and something happens on that property, somebody gets injured or whatever the case is, who is liable?
That's an excellent point. I would require the property owner to maintain liability coverage and name the city as an additional insured for that parcel of property. I think we've done that in other locations in the city, such as the Tabor Frankie Post, where we own the land. They have recently put us on as an additional insured for the property. That's a good point.
Okay, and what would happen if the new owner, the chiropractor, I guess it is?
Yes.
Sells his business, somebody else moves in there? Do we have to go through this again, or it just get transferred to the new owner?
I would have to look at the ordinance again. Let me just have a moment, Councilman. Yeah. This is an easement that runs with the land. So it would bind additional tenants or purchasers of the property in the city. There's a copy of the easement.
All right.
The easement specifically states that the easement's restrictions are that it's a right-of-way over that particular land that abuts Garden City Drive. It allows the holder of the easement to pass and repass over the land by vehicle or pedestrian traffic to maintain landscaping or signage consistent with the laws of the city, and the easement would run with the land, which would mean a subsequent grantee of the property would benefit from this.
I'm just curious, wouldn't it be easier just to sell it? It's only a small piece of property. And
Ease is not a real legal consideration for me, but I guess.
all right, it's food for thought.
Councilman Paplaskas, then Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I guess my question is to Evan, or whoever can answer it. Let's say we granted this tonight. Just say it was granted. 15 years from now, we want to extend the road, we want to revoke the easement. What's the process for that? And can you do that, or can you not do that, because now it's running in perpetuity after tonight?
Sit back here. I think the city still would have some rights over it. Again, they do maintain the ownership of the particular land. This just gives the particular person the right to repass over the city land and to install landscaping and signage consistent with the approval of the grantor, which is the city. I don't see any detriment to that.
Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. Having lived in that area for 40 years, one of the biggest problems that we have is traffic on Pontiac Avenue. If you notice, two businesses to the left of this property is a doctor's office where they only have one entrance going in and out. Extremely difficult to get out of that doctor's office. Looking at this particular property, this would allow for an easement onto Garden City Drive as well as one onto Pontiac Avenue. So as a result, it's definitely going to help the traffic in this area. So that's why I'm supporting it.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman McCauley.
Thank you, Council President. I don't want to speak on behalf of Mr. Murray, but I believe when this came before Public Works, he explicitly said that this would certainly allow, if the city decided to expand Garden City Drive, this would allow for that to occur without any repercussion.
I think that this is consistent with what the bank had. I don't think we are expanding any rights that didn't exist if the bank were to continue to operate. I just think that the new owner is not a bank, so therefore they're trying to not come before the council every time there's a subsequent tenant.
That's my understanding, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilman Arquette, and then Council Vice President Vecchio.
Thank you, President Farina. To the Chair of the Administration. First question, this is not a purchase, correct?
No, it's simply the allowing of access.
It's a transfer of land?
No, we're not transferring title of it at all. An easement simply allows them to use it as access to their property.
Easement would be part of a title, though, be part of the title, an easement.
It probably goes with the land, and maybe a tag on the title of the land that it's an easement, but the city still owns the property. They can't just arbitrarily put things on that property, for example.
So, if it's not a purchase, why is the purchasing agent is the authority for the transfer or for the approval?
I think
if
that's
it's not a
charter,
purchase.
actually. Is that per charter? I believe that's in the charter under his descriptions of duties.
Because
Any land use.
Okay, my question would be, I know there's a purchasing board, so it doesn't go before the purchasing board for a vote? It's the discretion of the purchasing...
Because we're not buying anything or selling anything. So
Right, so why is it on the auspices of the purchasing agent if we're not buying or selling anything? Why is it under his authority?
the charter dictates it that way. We don't put
And because we're not
example.
purchasing, the board doesn't vote on it. That's what you're saying.
But for example, when we do the lease to the Hope Alzheimer's Center, that comes to the council. That does not go to the purchasing board. But I work with the purchasing agent on that lease.
But this isn't going to the board, Robin. It's not being
But that's
voted
what
on.
I'm saying. Neither does a lease, for example, go to the board.
Right.
They come to the council.
Right.
So we're not transferring the ownership, we're not giving it, there's actually no title transfer. It's simply access. Now, your question of why it's the purchasing agent, that's
my
just in the
question.
history of the charter. It's just under him to have to...
Okay, even though it's not a purchase,
I'm sorry, because I have to apologize. I actually thought it was under his duties and descriptions.
even though it's not a purchase, it still goes to the purchasing agent? That's the answer I'm getting?
Yeah, it's just the protocol for that it goes through.
So the answer I'm getting, even though it's not a purchase, it still goes to the purchasing agent?
Officially, that's the process it goes through?
It doesn't go to the board, the purchasing board, for a vote?
No.
Correct?
No different than, again, a lease does not.
All right, thank you.
Council Vice President.
Thank you, Council President. Through the chair to the solicitors that we have, could we add some language to ensure that the liability insurance is maintained on the property or by the city still?
Yeah, when I said that, I glanced over Mr. Murray, and I think he acquiesced to the city being, so I think that would be good. I think that's something that we would require, since that person is using the property, he should indemnify and hold harmless the city, as well as to make sure that there's liability coverage that runs in favor of the city in the event.
Okay, and in addition, what about some language with regard to future needs of condemnation or for roads or whatever?
Well, I don't think it's condemnation, because we always retain title.
We have to, yeah.
Yeah, so, specifically what happened was, just let me give you a background of this section. So, Councilman Stikos had part of the story right and part of it wrong, because I was involved with this. What happened was, at the time, it was during the Laffey administration, you're correct, that behind the Knightsville garage, there was an odd piece of property. It was an L-shaped piece of property. And the administration at that point in time wanted to give that piece of property to the Cerebral Palsy Association. And what they wanted to do is to create independent housing for people with cerebral palsy. And they didn't have quite enough money to build it. So the administration at that point in time wanted to donate that land to them, to give it to them in fee simple. And the council thought that they should pay for it. So it ended up in a Superior Court case. Pat Quinlan represented the city council, and I represented the administration. We drew straws, and that's who we got. And actually, Judge Fortunato issued a ruling that the city doesn't have to act in the commercially best interests of the city. The city could choose to give away land for a charitable or benevolent purpose as they saw fit. And that was a political decision. It didn't have to be an economic one. So following that, that's where Council Stikos is correct at this point in time, where Council President at that point in time, Garabedian, introduced a resolution unhappy with the fact that cerebral palsy people got this for free, I guess. But he introduced something on the charter that the sale of land or the giving of land had to be for a price, contemplating that what that transfer was a fee simple deed of interest to that association. The fire truck was a side issue that I spent many weeks in Central Falls trying to track down. We won't go there tonight, but I can never get those weeks back.
Thank you.
Councilman Stikos.
So just to follow up on Councilman Favicchio's question, how do we make sure that the liability issue is part of this arrangement?
You can make an amendment, and or we can write it into the easement as a condition.
Do you have a suggested wording for the amendment?
I would say so long that this easement is good as so long as the tenant indemnifies and holds the city harmless as to any occurrence which happens on the easement, as well as to maintain liability insurance in an amount commercially sufficient, and name the city as an additional insured of said policy.
Okay, I'd like to make that as a motion.
I have
It's just what I was going to say.
solicitor said in the form of a motion. Do I have a second? Second. I have this motion and a second under discussion. Germane to the amendment? Germane to the insurance amendment? Anything on the amendment, Council Vice President?
Yeah, just one other thing. Would you need to put something in that, Evan, to be determined, the amount, the sufficiency of that amount to be determined by whom or by the city or by the
commercially reasonable
I would
covers
say
that.
commercially reasonable. I mean, the fact of the matter is, if something happens on that property, the reasonable likelihood is, since the doctor's practice had control of it, that they would be sued. We might get brought in if someone did a title search. But that doctor's going to want to make sure that he has enough insurance to cover the premises, especially with medical patients coming in and out. So I'm sure Mr. Murray and I can work out the amount.
Any others on the amendment?
For clarification,
Yes, Madam Clerk.
the solicitor is asking that that amendment be added to the actual easement that's recorded in the land records as well?
That's fine.
Seeing no further questions, clerk, please take the roll.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Any further discussion? I'll wait for Councilman Arquette. We're in the discussion on the ordinance as amended. Councilman Arquette, you got the last word.
Thanks to Director Munchkin and the solicitor. They did give me the part of the ordinances, so I just want to read this publicly so we know where. This is the Rhode Island Code of Ordinances. Any lease or rental of city-owned real property shall be authorized by resolution, we're doing an ordinance, but resolution of the city council. If the city council does not take any action within 40 days, receipt of the proposed lease or rental notice, the lease or rental shall take effect. But my question is, we're not leasing or receiving any compensation at all. This easement is just being given to this entity without any compensation. So because of that, I can't see why it falls under the purchasing agent. That's my argument.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other further discussion on the ordinance as amended? Seeing none, clerk, please take the roll. As amended. Councilman Lanning on the ordinance as amended.
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Chairman Hopkins. Moving on to Ordinance Committee, Council Majority Leader Paplowskis.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, we have Ordinance 8-1801, Ordinance Amendment of Title II of the Code of City of Cranston, 2005, entitled Administration and Personnel. Personnel Diversity Hiring, sponsored by Councilman Stichels.
We have motion approved? Motion approved. I have motion approved. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. Director Muskin, or just to background for the people in the audience, this went before the Ordinance Committee earlier this month. Unfortunately, there were no members of the administration, the personnel, fire department, the police department present to have a hearing on this, so we made the decision to forward it to the full council without a recommendation, so we could actually hear from the personnel director, Director Muskin. Well, you were there, Director Muskin.
No, I wasn't. I thought Carlos was there. That's
Carlos was there, but only in spirit. So we wanted to hear from the people, which we did, so thank you for coming tonight. We also wanted to hear from Director Perillo and Director Muskin on this. For background, this came before the council in November of last year, where at the time Director Koop was the Director of Administration. He did inform Councilman Stichels that this was a priority. Unfortunately, with some headcount moves in the City Hall and the new Personnel Director, this, I don't want to say got forgot, but got forgot. So at this point, we felt it reasonable to send to the full council so we can try to get some things talked about, because diversity is very important to this council.
Yeah, thank you so much. I had not been aware that prior to my return that this had been on a docket, and I'm going to defer to Director Perillo for the numbers and the success we've had in diversifying since he's been here and since I've been back and over the past year or so. But I do want to address a couple things very briefly. First of all, something came up about the fire department, and Ms. DeRozier had a point. Was it Mr. Rozier? Somebody? No. Somebody mentioned a point about adding the points. Actually, Mr. Valletta mentioned about adding points and how it would take somebody from 88 to right up to the top of the list, to the top percentages. One of the concerns I have, for example, we just hired a young black man in one of our departments. It happened not to be a tested position, but had it been a tested position, he would not have had the advantage of those 5 points. I don't know that he speaks Spanish. There's certainly nothing indicating that he does. But if he's not Spanish speaking, there's a particular example where diversification would not have been able to happen, and we want to be representative of all. We are not certainly opposed to hiring minorities, and again, I'll defer to Director Perillo on that. But in speaking with both the police and fire chiefs, their concerns were exactly the point of, number one, who's going to determine what proficiency is? And we're going to have to hire someone to do that, or testing. And even if we are able to do that, proficiency does not necessarily guarantee the hiring of minorities. We have many white people who speak Spanish. And again, that's great. We love having bilingual people, but if the goal is to diversify, this isn't going to necessarily do it. The other mention was of, I believe Mr. Vincent was here earlier. I think I saw him come in. We have actually sat with Mr. Vincent, both our police and fire departments, in active efforts to recruit minority, and we continue to do so. We just sat with Mr. Vincent before this latest fire recruitment process started. We are committed to this. It's extraordinarily important, but I'm just not comfortable with just a blanket 5 points without any determination of who's getting that specifically. And again, we run to the question of which languages. We have a huge number of diverse languages in the city, and I don't know where that 5% hits on that census, and if it changes at any time, that creates a challenge for us. So we have several concerns about this. We have absolutely no concerns with diversifying and being more representative, and again, Mr. Perillo has numbers on that. So I just want to talk about what our concern is. We are happy to continue to work on this process, but just don't believe that this is the mechanism to do so. And if I could defer to Mr. Perillo, to Director.
Thank you, Director Muskie. Director Perillo?
Mr. President, members of the council, thank you very much. I'd like to break down the ordinance that's proposed in two parts. The first part is the veterans points. The veterans points is already addressed in Rule 5 of the Civil Service Rules. It allows 5 points for honorably discharged male, 10 points for a member discharged with disability. So Rule 5 already addresses veterans points. The parameters for the veterans points were established by the council in 2005 as to whom can qualify for it. Obviously, it's World War II, Korea, Persian Gulf. There's a list established in 2005 as to who qualifies for the veterans points. So that is already established in the Civil Service Rules and the Charter. Regarding the points for Spanish speaking, like Director Muxine said, I don't think that gets to the root of our problem. We definitely need more minorities. We're actively working on that. Last year we did a study and we were at approximately 4.5% of the city was minority employed. Since then, we've approached 11.5% in our latest 47 hirings. So we are making progress there. As I mentioned earlier, we are reaching out to minority communities. Each one of our job descriptions goes to 32 different minority communities, advertising what we have, what the civil service rules allow for, what the requirements are, what the testing requirements are. It is broken down piece by piece by piece. And I think they are working. I think that outreach and that recruitment is working. Our most recent test was a police dispatcher advertisement. We had 25 applicants so far, and 25% of them were minority. So I think the word is getting out. I haven't had the test for that position yet, but there's a good chance that the top of that list should have a minority on there, exclusive of whether they're given 5 points or not. I don't think the 5 points addresses the issue. I interviewed a white male 2 days ago who has a bachelor's degree in Spanish. So obviously he would qualify for those 5 points, but that would possibly disenfranchise a black male, an Asian male, a Hispanic male who speak English. So I think this is just a start, but I think we need to work together on this and have all the people at the table together, including the unions. The unions need to be a part of this. All the collective bargaining agreements have promotional processes and points within them, and the civil service rules and resolutions and ordinances have to be in line with that. So I think that, again, this is definitely a start, but I don't think this particular ordinance gets us to where we need to be.
If I could just add, we also hired, somebody mentioned that we hired our first female firefighter. We have since hired 2 more. And again, when we're looking at a number going from the 80s to the top for 5 points, we don't know what that might have done for the hiring of those females as well. That might have pushed them down as well. So diversification comes in all forms, and we're really pleased that now we have 3 females in the department, and we'll continue to have more, and minority females, even better. But the fear of losing one versus another or picking just seems really disconcerting to me.
Thank you, Director. Councilman Stichels.
First, I'd just like to, like Mr. Kirschenbaum, correct something that Council President said on the history. This was first introduced in October 2016, so this has been 2 years. I withdrew it when Director Koop said that Mayor Fung supported it and that he just wanted to issue a personnel rule to do that, and that that was the proper way he thought to deal with the issue. And so in the spirit of being cooperative, I withdrew my proposal. Then nothing happened, and I was told, oh, well, Mr. Koop's been very busy, but we're going to hire a personnel director, and he'll do it. And so then we hired a personnel director who started, I believe, in August 2017.
Correct.
And nothing has been done on this. This, while it is true that this would probably help with diversity. I don't think we can award points legally to solely for the purpose of diversity. The purpose of this is so that people who speak Spanish, when they come into City Hall, can communicate with someone other than Mr. Lopez, who we all know is soon to be going up to the State House with Governor Fung, and will really be in a mess. So the Spanish is selected because, according to the census, in 2015, 9.8% of the Cranston population speaks Spanish. The next highest language, according to the census, is Portuguese at 1.9%, followed by Chinese, Italian, Arabic, and Mon Khmer, all of which are between 1 and 2%. So we have a large Spanish-speaking population, and we need to provide the same services that everyone else has to them. And that requires, in many cases, speaking the Spanish language. If someone, I think Mr. Valletta said, well, what if a white person speaks Spanish? Well, there are a lot of white people who speak Spanish. Many of them are from Latin America, and that's fine. That's what we want by these 5 points, is we want some people who can speak Spanish. As far as how that would work, what they do in Central Falls is they have a standard test that is administered by a Spanish teacher in the high school, and either you pass it or you don't pass it. So that's how that would work. I think it would be quite easy to do, as it has been done in Central Falls. We have to recognize that this city has a large Spanish-speaking population, and we need city government to be able to respond to that population. And in the process, yes, that may help diversify the workforce, but I would certainly agree that this is by no means enough on its own to diversify the workforce. So I would urge passage of this. It's one small step we can take to help our population, which 9.8%, as I said, speaks Spanish in the city.
Councilman Papalauskas, then Councilman McCauley.
Thank you, Council President Farina. This is very important to me. Diversity is very important to me. Some of you might know, my wife immigrated to this country from the Dominican Republic, so passing something like this is near and dear to my heart. I just want to make sure we can do it in a way that doesn't affect union contracts that were negotiated in good faith. So I don't know what the answer to that is. I don't know if Director Perillo, if you have an answer, or Director Muskie. And I want to make sure that if we pass something, we're not jeopardizing those union contracts. If this is something we can negotiate with them or do something like that.
In the contract, it states that, again, whether, of course, the unions think that their contract is lock solid, but it does state in the contract that CBA does override any civil service rules, or any ordinances that are passed have to be in collusion with that agreement. They have to be in concert. We can't pass something that's outside of the collective bargaining agreement. I think that's why we need to sit down and talk about how we can move forward without violating the CBAs and also improving our diversity.
Thank you.
Councilman McCauley.
Thank you, Council President. I commend Councilman Stichels on reintroducing this. That being said, since I've dealt with the Director Perillo, I have the utmost confidence in his diversification plan, and I also heed the chief's warning regarding how we may be in violation of the contracts that we work so hard to pass. So I would ask that we study this closer and make amendments where it need be. I certainly support Councilman Stichels' intent, and I hope to work with him to see if we can come up with something that's acceptable to everyone. Thank you.
Councilman Brady.
I also commend Councilman Stichels for this and staying on it, because I would absolutely agree. Diversity definitely needs to improve in the city of Cranston. However, I also agree with Councilman McCauley, and one of the reasons I got in politics was to hear from the people and to obviously listen, whether it was Democratic or Republican. And as an independent growing up my whole life, keeping politics aside, I think it definitely needs to improve, and I think everyone in this room agrees that it needs to improve. And I applaud the people today, like Ms. Louise Vargas and others in the crowd that came and spoke up on this important issue. But at the same time, hearing from the fire department and others, I don't think it's necessarily all there. So I would recommend to this council that we maybe start a study commission and put people from the community and put the fire department on it and put the NAACP on it, and let's make some positive change beyond this one thing, and let's move forward with it.
Councilman Arquette.
Thank you, President Farina. I want to commend my colleague, Councilor Stichels, for working hard. I know he's been trying to, pass something of this nature for a while. Also, the fire department and the police department have been making inroads and working and trying to make our departments more diversified. I've known they came in here, I guess, was it last year with a seminar, and they changed their method of testing. So we've been working on this issue. It hasn't, this is not the first time we've seen it. But if I'm going to pass something, I want to pass something that's good, that's going to help members of the public. I don't want to pass a faulty piece of legislation. And it's come to my attention that there are flaws in this ordinance. I think it's needed. I think we need to diversify much more, but we need an ordinance that's going to be effective. Speaking Spanish is not going to hire the people who may need to be hired. Maybe a white person who can speak Spanish. So, we need to address these flaws in this legislation. How are we going to do that? I think we need to sit down, as my colleague, Mr. Brady said, with some type of study commission where we bring everyone to the table, the union representatives, people of color, people of minorities, white individuals, and we discuss this. We discuss this and we get the best bill possible. I don't think this is the best bill possible. I think it may cause some harm rather than do the right thing. So my recommendation would be if we could send this back to committee and start a study commission and have members of the public sit in and the members of the union representatives. I think that would be the best for everyone. That's my recommendation. Thank you.
Councilman Lanning.
Thank you, Council President. I agree with my fellow council people, Councilman Brady and Councilman Arquette also. When I graduated from Cranston High School East, there was one minority in my graduating class. Today, if you go to Cranston East, the minority population is huge. That tells you how this city has changed over the years. We have to accommodate those changes. It's our duty as elected officials. The minority population in this city has not been handled correctly as far as jobs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if we're going to do this, and we're going to set up some kind of a commission or board to sit down together with the unions, Mr. Perillo and the council, then set it up and do it and put a deadline and get it done. I've seen too many commissions put together that went absolutely nowhere, and 2 years later, and this ordinance is a good example of what happened. 2 years later, we're talking about the same ordinance, Nothing was done over the 2 years, or not enough was done, let's put it that way. So I think this, and I give Steve credit, all the credit in the world on this, because he stuck through it, and he's absolutely right. We have to make these changes, and I think everybody here agrees on that. Let's work together for a change. Let's put together a commission. Let's get something going so that 6 months from now we can say, this is what we're going to do. And for that reason, I would like to vote to continue this particular amendment, or ordinance, I should say.
As a point of information, before we move on, there was no committee vote on this, so it did not pass out of committee. We could make a motion to send it back to committee for discussion at some point. Councilman Hopkins, you are next, and then Councilman Stichels, I will come back to you.
Thank you, Mr. President. One of the recommendations I would make would be that if we're going to do some type of committee on this, that we include the school department. They use the pathway programs that are brand new to their schools. An example might be the ROTC program, where many of the minority students at Cranston East graduate from the school and then go into the military service. They're now starting to do that with public safety programs and courses being taught at the schools. And I think, especially for the fire and the police department, a perfect place to go and recruit future prospects for your programs would be at our own schools. And as we start to establish public safety courses, let's say taught by our police department or the state police to come in and teach our kids, we're kind of grooming our future police force, which would be extremely diverse. And I'm all for supporting this diversity program. I've got a grandson that's Puerto Rican. I've got a grandson and a granddaughter that are half Filipino. So I would, just because I'm white and Irish doesn't mean I don't support anything that's a minority. Growing up in Johnston, being Irish definitely fit the bill as well. So again, I would recommend that we get the schools involved and continue this so that we can really come up with a good ordinance. But I also agree with Councilman Laney that we should do this ASAP and not let it linger.
Councilman Stichels, you're up.
I'll be brief. I just want to reemphasize what the Personnel Director said, that this cannot in any way affect a union contract. We can't pass an ordinance saying that the Public Works Department will work on Columbus Day. The collective bargaining agreement takes precedence over anything we do. So this would only apply to entry-level positions. It's not a promotional issue at all.
Council Vice President?
Thank you, Council President. Just a history, Councilman Stichels and I, and Councilman Laney, Councilman Arquette have been dealing with this for many years. And I remember going back a few years, we had a discussion about the fire department and changing some of the rules there. And it was aptly pointed out by Deputy Chief Valletta that there are certain requirements, such as cardiac training and swim training, that we can't relax. We can't just relax a certain rule. But we did discover that we have programs available to assist any minority that wants to take the cardiac training so that they don't have to pay for it. I remember suggesting we have the vocational school, which could certainly tailor some of its courses to helping to recruit people for police and fire. One of the things we learned with that was that the applications were so far down with regard to police and fire that people are just not applying for the jobs in general, never mind from the minority community. So I think our job has been made much worse and much more difficult because people are just not applying for those type of civil service jobs. Maybe they're dangerous jobs, obviously, and it must be hard recruiting policemen at this point. So I think we've been working on this quite a while. Hiring Director Perillo, was a big first step, I think, in getting more recruiting going, because you have someone full-time who's working on all different aspects of this, and I think we'll get there. The other thing that we talked about a couple of years ago was that, you know, the workforce has been in place now for many, many years. You can't just magically lay off 20% of the people so that you can hire different people. So there has to be, as Councilman Stichels said, new entries. But we have done some recruiting. Having 2 more female firefighters, I think, is a big accomplishment, but I think those people may not have qualified under this ordinance. So I'm in favor of doing some work, some real serious work on this. I think there may be other methods to get to where Councilman Stichels is trying to get, and it may take us a few more years to get people to apply from the minority communities. It's just not that easy. I'm sure Director Perillo, I know you've stepped up the efforts. Maybe you can enlighten us on what, you know, the efforts that you've made and where you've gone.
Since I've been in place, we've used Employ Rhode Island, which is it's a website the state maintains, but it has connections with 30 minority associations, Progressive Latino, the NAACP. I've spoken to, we met with Mr. Vincent. I've spoken to Progressive Latino, just trying to get the word out that the city of Cranston's hiring and we want you to apply. That's our goal, is to get the number of applicants up. Once the number of applicants are up, the minority applicants are up, then that's going to give us a better chance of gaining someone to actually employ. The more applicants, they take the tests, we have the better percentages, and that's our main goal, is to get the word out that Cranston's hiring. We want to hire minorities. These are the requirements. Let us know whatever we can do to help you get to that point. Like you said, the EMTC, whatever we can do to make you part of our community, that's our goal.
Any further comments? Okay, so I believe in diversity. I have for a long time. I've been on this council for 6 years. This is my 6th year and my first term as president. The reason I know this did come up in 2016, as Councilman Stichels is referencing. However, at that time, I believe there was some language in there that talked 2 promotions, and it did not come out of committee. And then it came back again in 2017 in the form that it's in now, and that's when Director Coop had promised Councilman Stichels that some work will get done on this. At that time, I asked Carlos Lopez there is a diversity commission that exists. Unfortunately, it exists in the administration, not through the council. I did ask Director Lopez at that time to start looking at the diversity commission again. Again, with, like Councilman Stichels' ordinance, nothing has happened. So I'm glad to hear my colleagues in government talking about a panel. I'm glad to hear them say this has to get done fast, because coming here tonight, my goal was to create a panel. To be honest with you, in the committee meeting, when this came up the first time, I supported Councilman Stichels to send this here tonight for an open, frank discussion with the city leaders, city council, and the residents. That being said, I plan to create a study commission, understanding that some of these things may need to go into union contracts go forward. So the unions will need a seat at the table. The administration is going to have to negotiate those contracts, so they're going to need a seat at the table. Democrats and Republicans are going to need a seat at the table, because this is not a partisan issue. This has nothing to do with the party labels we may claim to be beholden to when we run for office, but as most of you know, I've been both. So I'm not beholden to either one. I'm beholden to the city. So in reality, we need a commission to study this and to do it the right way. I think this is a good framework. I agree that points should be given to people when they are deserved. 5 might not be the right number based on some of the testimony we've had from the unions tonight, but I think as a group we can come together and figure that out. So I look to any suggestions from the members of the council on who else should be on the study commission. I'm hopeful to get it to me by the next, this would go back to the ordinance committee. If by the next ordinance committee people could submit who they think should be on this commission other than the natural ones, the union leaders, the members of the city administration, an attorney from the solicitor's office, members of the school department. I mean, those are the obvious choices. I would like to collaborate with everyone. So as you're thinking about this, we should look to see who else we should put on this and potentially try to figure out the way to drive diversity, because I can remember sitting in budget hearings 4 years ago and listening to Chief McKenna talk about all the work that they've done with the high schools and the NAACP. They've done work to try to drive recruiting, and the pool is growing. Director Perillo is right. The pool has grown in the last 4 years since we've started talking about this. And I love how everybody came here tonight, and thanks Steve for this, but this is a council issue that we've really all together been fighting for with Steve as the lead. So I thank you, Councilman Stikos, for continuing to keep us honest and keep us on track. Councilman Lanny, the only thing I will disagree with you on, I don't think we can wait 6 months, because sadly, in 3 months, yourself and Councilman Arquette will no longer be on this body, and I do treasure and value your knowledge. I'd like to have your input in this committee, so I'd like to get it done faster than 6 months. So by the next ordinance committee meeting, if you could submit recommendations to who you think should be on the council, I'll take it on the commission, I'll take it under advisement, and work to build a collaborative commission to study diversity with a date certain to get this done before the next election, because some of us might not be sitting here come January. Thank you. Councilman Stikos, do you want to withdraw or let your motion come to a vote?
I'm going to ask for it to come to a vote because I was accused by a member of the Rhode Island Latino Political Action Committee when they interviewed me of compromising too much. Which I said, well, maybe you should talk to other members of the city council about that.
Councilman Paplaskas.
Well, since this came up to committee without recommendation, can we make a motion to continue this back to ordinance committee where we're going to form the commission anyways? That way, this doesn't get stopped in its tracks.
I have a motion to send this back to the committee. I have a second. Under discussion. Seeing none, clerk, please take the roll on the motion to send this back to committee. Yes.
Yes. No.
Yes.
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 Okay, moving on.
The stenographer, do you need a little break? You want to plow through? Plow through. Thank you for your service.
Okay, moving on, we have, under Ordinance Committee, Ordinance 8-1802, Ordinance Amendment of Title 15.12 of the Code of City of Cranston, 2005, entitled Building Code Violations, Electronic Monitoring, sponsored by Councilman Stikos.
I'll entertain a motion to approve. Motion approved. My motion approved. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second. Under discussion? Council Vice President Favicchio.
Thank you, Council President. I understand the desire to straighten out the building code issues in the city, but I think Pauline probably made the best argument about how we should approach this. I think getting the calendar, the municipal court calendar online with a description of what's being heard is probably the best way to get the transparency that you're looking for. I think the problem with having a running count of all complaints is going to weaponize that system. You're going to have people who may hate their neighbor and who may generate 3 or 4 complaints on the same property, and then those things are going to be public record. How will that affect not only someone who's unable to take care of the property, but how is that going to affect them when they go to sell the property? We know Sooner discussed this, I believe, a couple of months ago or a month ago, and someone that both Councilman Stikos and I both know complained that I heard from a constituent, someone that we both know, that had been, the police had been called twice to go to their house for something that was frivolous. Now, if those complaints were online and recorded somewhere so that someone could research those, you could really cause some damage to someone, and it may or may not be deserved. I think the problem is the process itself. Some of it is governed by state law. The $50 a day fines are a maximum that are imposed under the state building code, and we have no way of getting around that. So some of the complaints by people that spoke really should be addressed at the state level, because the state really dictates the building codes for all of the cities. They also dictate the rules at DEM, which may apply to Yardworks and other companies that are dispersing different types of chemicals or soot or whatever debris. And I do have an issue on Pontiac Avenue, the same thing. But I'm not sure that the city can actually make any rulings. The city has the power, our municipal court, and we don't have a housing court, as does Providence. I've appeared before there quite a bit in the last year. But I don't think we have the demand to set up that type of procedure and the cost that it takes. The municipal court can handle it. We need to process the cases faster, maybe, but I think that this is going to create a real problem, and I just can't support doing this and creating a situation where you could have neighbors fighting with each other by filing all kinds of complaints.
Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, President. Mr. Kirschenbaum, just a question on the legality of this amendment, this ordinance.
Councilman Hopkins, not to interject, but I believe Councilman Verdecchia has been the lead attorney
Yes.
the last couple of times, if not.
That's fine. I could defer to Mr. Verdecchia as well, because I've asked this question in committee. I'd like to know what the legality of this is, and would we, by putting anybody's name in any type of electronic monitoring, be held liable for any type of maybe slander or whatever?
Well, just for the edification of the council members that weren't present at the committee hearing, I think after discussion and after reviewing the Access to Public Records Act, which is codified under state statute, this ordinance was amended so that the only information that would be released would not occur until after a violation was actually issued and noticed. That comports with state statute. And to Vice President Favicchio's concern, the state statute is very clear that the investigatory phase is off limits, so that if a neighbor were using this as a harassment tool, unless an inspector went out and actually found that there was merit to the complaint, actually issued the violation, gave them a court date, that would not be allowed to be disclosed under APRA, which is the acronym for the Access to Public Records Act. So I thought that the Councilman Stikos had asked if we could amend, I think it was the first sentence, to clarify that issue. And I think the committee was in agreement at that time that to insert the word issuance would sort of provide the dividing line between what was permissible to release and what was not. So once the violation issues, it becomes a public record anyway. Anyone could go to the code enforcement office, they could go to the courthouse, there's a docket that's printed, their name is there with the type of violation. So I hope I didn't go around in a circle, but the short answer is no, the city would not be subject to any sort of slander or libel concern.
Thank you.
That's okay. Very quickly, to what Mr. Verdecchia said, yes, I do understand it's been amended to be a violation. I did speak to the police chief about this, the colonel, and he did have some concerns as well, though, that even if it's a violation, the potential for harassment is there. I believe Mr. Roja really did hit the nail on the head. Sometimes there are people in violation that may have some very legitimate reasons. Somebody falls ill, somebody's elderly, property's in probate, and people are trying to work it out. If it's in probate, at one point, do we go in and fix a property? If it's an extreme public safety hazard, we do it. But we don't want to be in a position by putting something publicly on a database to incite neighborhood aggression, if you will, because we certainly have seen it before. Again, we are always happy when we are asked what the status of violations are, to provide those, and we will always do them readily. I do think, and we go back to the municipal court docket, and Vice President Favicchio mentioned this, that's really where the meat of this happens, because we can issue all the violations, but ultimately the penalties for it happen at court. And so we're happy to provide where we're at in the violation process, and I'm always happy to update when something's going to court, but it's even better if you can get online and see when it's at court. Then I don't mind you calling me, but it frankly is better for both of us if you don't have to. And so I think that that really is a much more productive mode. I just want to address this question about number of inspectors. We have in the past year hired 3 inspectors, Dan. So we have hired 3 inspectors, 1 bilingual, by the way, diverse and bilingual, I believe. And they're active, very active, and many of you know Mr. Avila comes out to your neighborhoods quite often. And so we did at one point, for a host of reasons, have 3 inspectors gone, and there were 3 positions. So we very, very actively had a list in place. We interviewed, we staffed. We just restaffed another position recently. So a lot of this is catch-up to some degree, and some of it is ongoing issues. The Yard Works one is an ongoing issue that is a state issue. We continue to fight what we can on the city side. Putting the notices, the violation notices up really would require that I hire somebody else. And again, do I really want to hire someone to be entering a database when I don't mind calling and telling you where the violations are, and then you can look up the court if we can get that online. It just seems like a much better process. I would prefer not to spend that kind of money to hire someone to enter data when, yeah, if I am going to hire someone, I'd rather get more inspectors than frankly, somebody to sit and do data.
Thank you, Director. Council Vice President Favicchio, then Councilman Lanny.
I have a follow-up. And people made comments about certain properties, and that 15 Capuano was one of them. The problem I see is that properties like that one, we did have fines running at $50 a day times maybe 4. A bank attempted to foreclose on that property. The problem was that the homeowner filed as part of somewhat of a class action suit to attempt to stop the foreclosure and actually void the mortgage entirely. So that property was tied up in federal court for 3 or 4 years, and there's nothing the city could do because no one knew who the ownership was in question, and the courts had to make the decision. So that property was sold, and the lien, I believe we got about $5,000 on that lien. I'm kind of disturbed that it's still not renovated because it was sold, I believe, to a private party. The city had tried to tried to buy it and donate it, and try to get one of those companies that will rehab houses, and they were going to do something to some charity, I think, and donate it. But that was rejected by the bank, which was the owner. And the other thing to remember is we're going to be going online with all of our records. So that particular case, the municipal court finding an order was recorded on the real estate records for anybody to find. Now, until now, you couldn't go online and find that record, but you will in about a month, I would imagine. You may be able to just go online and find it. So if you post the docket in the court and have the recording system where you can look it up online and you can actually see where the violation has been recorded, I think that will do the trick, rather than trying to take it from the initial stages and put all that data online. And what if they, appeal? What if there's an appeal? And then the municipal court judgment may not be final. So it would take an awful lot of work just to follow the track of complaints and have a website to show those things. And I think it is dangerous because I think people weaponize things like that, unfortunately, rather than using them as a shield. So I'm dead set against doing it even this way. I think there's another way to do it.
Councilman Lanny, then Councilman Hawkins.
Director Muxian, You mentioned earlier that the municipal court docket would be the best way to handle this. Currently, is there a municipal court docket that's online?
I don't believe so. And I think that that's a great point, that I don't believe it's online. Is it online? It's a general. Just a general schedule, but not a specific docket.
It's not online.
Nope.
So therefore, if we had to create a municipal court docket to put these things online, you'd have to hire a data processor.
No, it would be, actually, we have municipal court clerical staff, and to simply put which case is online would at least allow the public to know which particular house, so 133 Patuxent, or whatever the particular street is. They would see that, and the neighbors would then know that particular issue was on.
And they'd know what date that court date
Yes.
was and the time and everything else, and they could appear themselves.
We could do that, I think, pretty easily.
How long would it take to put a municipal court docket with that information online?
I think I could do that. We're probably working with the staff there. We could probably get that done that process done. Doing it would be quick, but getting the process set up to do it, probably within a matter of weeks.
A matter of weeks?
Yeah. I don't see why we couldn't.
So in other words, we can solve this whole problem in a matter of weeks.
A big hunk of it, yeah. I believe we could. I really think that suggestion was the best one I had that came in that email.
All right. Thank you, John. You had a great idea.
Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, President. Just first a point of information to Councilman Favicchio. That house on Capuano, I went in it 2 days ago. There was a contractor there. They're working on it every single day. Most of the inside is a result of the flood that we had about 5 or 6 years ago. He does own the house now. He's bought it. He's fixing it on a daily basis with the intent to flip it. So there is an awful lot of movement there. Just to the administration, on the same topic, Councilman McCauley and I have been probably for 2 years talking about a house on 10 Blackamore that we've continued to call, and there's still no movement on the house.
Let me find out. I'll find out. I'll check. That one's not on my radar, I don't think.
Thank you. May, Council President, just interject.
It's kind of not germane to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But it is being demolished.
Thank you.
Okay, good. That's why it's not on my radar.
Councilman Arquette, and then I see Councilman Stichels' finger.
Thank you, Council President Farina. On the bill, I want to commend Councilman Stichels again for his bill on transparency. I think we all are in favor of transparency. However, I have some concerns. My first concern is feuding neighbors and frivolous complaints. Are those frivolous complaints going to be logged in a computer where, you have all these hypotheticals that never transpire? I mean, that's just an opinion. Secondly, everyone is aware I'm running for the school committee, and I know that the school committee is advocating for more funds because they're talking about school safety, whatever they want to implement in the school. So that will be a big discussion for next fiscal year. If we pass this bill, is it going to overburden our inspection division? Is our inspection division going to need another person to log in all this information and put it online? If that's the case, that's another cost, that's another expense in the budget, and that's money that can't go to the children, to the schools, and they need to go to inspections. So we need to weigh this. I'd like to know, is there a fiscal note on this? Was there ever a fiscal note put on this legislation? As far as the costs, I'd like to have someone from inspections here to answer my questions. How much time is it going to consume? Are they going to need a part-time staff or full-time staff? And those are my concerns with this bill. Thank you, Council President.
If you like, I believe Director Muxian answered that earlier. If she wants, she can answer it again. Councilman Stichels, floor is yours.
Okay,
This proposal does not log in every complaint. It's only for complaints that are investigated and found by the building inspector to be legitimate. And then the building inspector issues a notice of violation. If the complaint is frivolous, it'll never be online. And this was worked on in committee with Mr. Igliozzi and the mayor's lawyer, and it's, as you can see, it says issuance of all building code violations. Doesn't say complaints. The first draft said complaints. But this just says issuance of all building code violations. And then at the bottom, in kind of making sure there's no misunderstanding, it says only information available in the Access to the Public Records Act. And as we were informed by council, the documents that are available under the Public Records Act are only those that are from the notice of violation onward. Okay. So it's not going to be frivolous complaints, Paul Arquette is selling drugs at Princess Avenue. That will not appear.
Point of information, Paul Arquette is not selling drugs on Princess Avenue.
Vitamins. Okay. All right. That's the first point. I have to say that I think the members of this council have listened endlessly about yard works. I've had it on the agenda, I believe, for 3 months in a row. And if the building inspector, after all that, and the notice of violation was finally issued, that then the second notice of violation on the floating objects was 45 days late. I find it extremely hard to believe that they would require a full-time person, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, on a computer entering all the notices of violation. So I think that's a gross exaggeration, and I really would appreciate it when we get into these discussions if we could try to be a little more realistic and not just say wild things like it would take a full-time person to do this.
Councilman, sorry, Steve.
Thank you. Equating Councilman Arquette with drugs is a gross exaggeration. Former police officer, a former state representative, so I take a lot of umbrage at that. And it's not an exaggeration. If there's a neighbor out there who wants to get you, no neighbors feud, no telling what would happen if that goes online. And that's my concern. Thank you.
Council Vice President Favecchio.
I'll try to be brief. I just think that it's a simple solution because if the notice goes to the municipal court and they issue a fine or the violation, you could record it on the real estate records, and then you wouldn't need the staff at the building inspector to get involved in that process. We just determine at what point they can be put on the real estate records, which are going to be online very shortly. And you solve the problem pretty easily. I think the biggest concern that I have is at what point is it a nuisance? Is it final? How does it affect their real estate titles? Providence is a nightmare for anyone who does conveyancing to handle the notice of violations. They put all their violations on record, on the land evidence records. You could do that. It just will take it'll take a lot of work to clear some of them in terms of financing and sales of property. But you could do that also. You could really bypass the inspections office, I think, and get these things online. I agree that they should be online. I just think the municipal court and the real estate records probably take care of it without having to burden the inspections division.
Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, I support the idea of transparency. I voted for this in committee. I'm really torn on it because I believe Councilman Papalowski said this in the committee meeting. that the one fear is that it creates a wall of shame for people. I know it doesn't list name, but addresses are there, so I don't want that as an unintended consequence. I do know that if it's done correctly and violations are adjudicated, then that is a matter of public record. My only issue is when something becomes adjudicated. I know in the criminal proceeding it's pretty straightforward because police are police, and when they file a crime and you get convicted, you've been adjudicated. For these, I don't believe the adjudication is when the violation is issued, but more when it goes through municipal court and the final fine is assessed. I think that's my only concern with it, but the changes that we made in the committee, I believe, address for that because we cannot violate Section 2A, I think it's 8-something-2A of the state statute. So I think we're okay. We'll see how the vote goes. Clerk, please take the roll.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
No. Yes. Motion passes. Next up, Councilman Paplaskas.
Okay, moving on, we have ordinance and amendment of Chapter 10.32, Title 10, the Code of City of Cranston, 2005, entitled Motor Vehicles and Traffic, Harwich Road and Chatham Road four-way stop, sponsored by Council President Farina. This is ordinance number 8-1807.
I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
A motion approved. Have a second? I have a second. Under discussion. Seeing none, clerk, please take the roll.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes. Public hearings, this section of the docket is open to any matter that anyone might want to speak about. Going once, going twice, closed. Election of city officials, Board of Canvassers. Deborah A. Canzone resigned a few months ago. The Democratic Party has a list of qualified voters. Democratic Minority Leader Arquette, I believe you have a nomination. He didn't send it? Okay. Councilman Lanning, you had the list? Okay.
Yes.
I believe it's Alice Patron was the first name on the list.
The nomination for the would be Alice Patron.
Alice Patron is the nomination coming from the Democrats. I have a motion to approve Alex Patron.
Motion to approve.
I have a motion to have a second. Clerk, please take the roll.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes. Report of city officers. We were clear. Executive communications, you all have the report on hiring legal counsel pursuant to Charter Section 1505. If you have any questions on that, now would be the time. Seeing none, there has been a request to be continuing service for 1 year. Deputy Chief Paul Valletta of the Cranston Fire Department.
Yep, so we actually, sorry.
Second. I have a motion for a second.
We actually have two requests tonight for extensions, both of deputy chiefs who are longstanding. I would like to say, as I always do, I always appreciate people who want to continue to serve and work and be part of our city. And I would like to thank both of these gentlemen. And in fact, Deputy Chief Valletta very recently was recognized by this council for his good work at the Process Fire, saving a neighborhood in Ward 1 from potential significant disaster at risk to his firefighters. And so with both these gentlemen, I just, these are both very long-standing members of the department. So we are very pleased that they continue service and recommend Deputy Chief Valletta be continued.
Has he met all the qualifications?
He has met all the qualifications.
Thank you for making that for the record. Councilman Stichels.
Quick general question. If they meet all the qualifications, then is it entirely up to the mayor whether he reappoints them with our approval, or are there certain rules that when they would not get approved?
It is not a reappointment. They are still firefighters. It is simply the fact that they're required to take a physical after a certain point. If they meet the qualifications of that physical, they request through the council to be approved. The executive communication is to share with you that they have met full requirements to be approved.
Right, but let's say they met all the qualifications and for some reason the mayor didn't want to reappoint them. Is that?
I don't believe we would have the authority to terminate their employment.
Okay.
I certainly wouldn't want to engage in that legal battle.
Well, I'm just curious
Yeah, there's nothing
why
in the
we're voting if
contract. Well, because the council votes, basically, actually, I'm not even sure this is a voted, it's an executive communication, so
It's funny, we voted on this for 6 years, and I believe former Council President Laney voted on it for 2 years prior to me, and then Council President Lupino for 2 years prior to that, and then Council President Laney for 2 years prior to that. So I think we've been voting on these for
I voted on this for 16 years.
16 years, so if we're not supposed to be doing it, I'd love to stop. But
I think it's a sort of a historic thing, and it's in the code somewhere because...
Yeah, there is a reason we
But the
vote.
reality is, I make the recommendation based on the fact that that person has met the qualifications. When we have a retirement, no different than I put a retirement in front of you. But I do not have the authority, if somebody meets the qualifications, to terminate somebody's employment simply because they're aging.
How about this, Councilman Stiekel? So I have one of the lawyers look it up in the code.
Yeah, I'm just curious, I mean, right? Doesn't.
I'm assuming it has something to do with there is no retirement board in the city, so the council has the authority to extend or reject someone. But I'm not sure. Councilman Arquette.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. I'm proud to confirm Officer Firefighter Rulo and Firefighter Valletta for the year, their expertise, their devotion to duty. I think the city of Cranston has a great team with the both of them. And I remember, I think it was my first year as a councilman, the dire straits here, financial dire straits in the city of Cranston. It was the fire department that stepped up. First organization stepped up and to try to give something back to the city in order for us to stay afloat. So it's with a proud privilege that I will confirm both those gentlemen. Thank you.
Second.
I have a motion to approve in a second. Council Vice President Favecchio.
Yep. Thank you, Council President. I would echo Councilman Arquette's comments. I've gotten to know these two gentlemen over the last 8 years, so I know all of their work, and they're really dedicated to the city, so I'm really glad that they're both willing to continue in service.
Anyone else? I'll just add that, like most firefighters, they are dedicated to their jobs, but few go as above and beyond as Deputy Chief Paul Valletta. I've gotten to know him very well over the last 6 years. He's a testament to his profession. I know of few braver men in my life to walk into a chemical fire with no apparatus at all and stand there while his men fought the fire to make sure everyone was out of the building safely. You, sir, they broke the mold and they made you. So thank you for staying on for one more year. Clerk, please take the roll.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Motion to approve. Second.
I have a motion to approve in a second. Under discussion, I'll have a few kind words about Deputy Chief Rulo. I've gotten to know him as well over the last 6 years. Another man whose bravery and sacrifice for the city know no bound. I can't think of two better men to continue to lead our firefighter teams into battle every day, because that's really what they do. So again, thank you, Deputy Chief Rulo, for your service. I'm glad you're staying one more year.
His recommendation, she'll forward, and he forwards.
Clerk, please take the roll.
So it's exactly what we've been doing.
Yes.
I thought it was.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, and Madam Clerk looked it up. It is in the code. We are the appointing body for firefighters that are above the age of 55. So the mayor...
It's an advice and consent, advice and consent section. Interesting, yes.
Well, actually, no, it's under the firefighter section,
But it
Same process.
functions the same way. Yeah, we learned something.
You learned something new. Under Council President Communications, a lot of people came here tonight and talked about diversity, which is fantastic. Some people made some comments relating to the makeup of this council. People vote for who they vote for. Women ran last time, minority women ran last time, they didn't win. We can't control who our peers vote for, but we are voted on by a group of our peers, including minorities, people who don't speak English. I know I've been voted for by many people as I've walked this city, especially in areas of Ward 3, Ward 1, who barely speak a word of English, but still pointed at me because of the bald head and the giant size, you're Farina. So I shudder to think what would happen if people didn't vote for who they wanted. We're here because we were elected. If you don't like us, elect somebody else. But we're here. These jobs are not glamorous. These jobs are not high-paying. These jobs are barely considered jobs. We're not employees as much as we are volunteers. A stipend of $4,000 for the councilman and $5,000 for me really don't get that far when you consider the hours we all put into this job. I say every person that has ever served this city or will ever serve this city in this capacity sacrifices time away from their families, time away from their loved ones, time away from social activities to do this job. It is not a job that everyone wants. I respect the individuals I've served with for the last 6 years, and I respect everyone in that picture around this room who have done this job, because it is not easy. Sometimes it's fun, but the best part is rewarding and helping people and doing the right thing. And I urge every council person, whether you're elected in January or not, as long as you know you've done the right thing, you'll be fine. Moving on. Councilmember Communications. Councilman Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, the discussion on the relocation of the Recreation Department and the Cranston Public Schools Director of Athletics to the Pastore Center. I know Director Liberatore was here this evening. I was under the impression that we had talked with all the parties and that this was a go. I did talk with the superintendent, and I talked to the Recreation Director in the past. Obviously, Tony has, I guess, changed his mind in terms of the amount of space that's available over there. One of the problems that the athletic director has is he's on the third floor of Horton School, and it's not handicapped accessible. And we were just trying to take the two departments from the city side and the school department and bridge them into one. So it looks like we may have to look for another site for that, but in my evaluation, I thought there was plenty of room over there, but Director Liberatore said no, so I guess we have to move on that. The second area that I had was the waste management trucks. A couple of things. One is that they're coming a little bit early on their pickup routes, 6:30, 6:45 in the morning. We may want to send them a little notice about that. But also, we're getting a problem with, and I don't know whether it's the new construction on Reservoir Avenue that's causing it, but we've got an increase of the waste management trucks going through Cypress Drive as an alternate east-west route. And recommendation possibly to put some no-through truck signs in the area. I've had a similar issue with Colonial Drive as well, that I've reported trucks coming out of Dave's Market. But this is particular to Garden City, and I would hate to see that this continue and be a trend of a truck route through that area.
And it's only waste management trucks
Yes,
that are present?
at this point.
Can you send me an email?
Sure, I will.
You know me, you got to send me the email.
I will send you an email.
Okay.
And just my last update is the third DreamWorks project basketball court at Garden City School. The baskets are up, the court has been painted, the kids are using it, and we're just waiting for the ribbon cutting ceremony. So that is completed. Great. And I'd like to thank Councilman Favicchio and Brady for helping me with that project, as well as the three of us sharing in the cost of the benches that were donated to the park as well. So nice to go by there and see the kids out there playing.
I'm actually going to add one for Councilman Hopkins. He asked for something to be on this agenda, and I asked him to put it on the Public Works Committee or the Ordinance Committee, depending on where we go. He has a concern with Harrington Hall and some issues that are happening there. If you, Director Muskian, can make some contacts to the state, he's looking for a report to see what's being done there to deal with sex offenders. I know you were going to mention it tonight. I just didn't want you to forget.
I'll work with the
Thank you, President. Yeah, in particular, we did get a notice the other day of level 3 sex offenders being housed in the hotel just next to Garden City. And there's a concern by residents in the area, especially being so close to playgrounds and schools. I know Councilman McCauley has a similar concern at another spot, but I'm concerned for that area in Garden City at the hotel on Reservoir Avenue that is housing some of those sex offenders.
I'll work with the police department on those issues and ensure that those are, per state law, legitimate places that people can be housed. And if they are, we'll also continue to have the police department work on patrol and enforcement if we need to do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Could you have an update for Councilman Hoppe? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Councilman Stichels.
Yes, so I guess I would ask if there was anything about the yard works situation that was not mentioned tonight in the discussion.
No, I have the copies of the two notices of violation that went out September 13th. As I did indicate, in between the notice of violations on the building, they did go to planning. We were not comfortable with what they presented as plans. They were turned away and told to basically go back to the drawing board. They are now issued the second notice of violation. And again, from there, after so long, it will go to the courts.
I was told that there was a similar case in municipal court with Northeast Tree.
Mm-hmm.
Can I get a copy of whatever there is on that, or?
I can try to find out from the courts what that is, but yes, it's a very similar situation, and it was several nurseries that ended up lobbying the state after that to get the state law changed. And so I can try to dig up that case for you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councilman Arquette.
Thank you, President Friend. Just be brief. I'm going to skip Calhoun Road. We don't need to discuss that. Just want to bring to the council's attention, to your attention, President Friend and the administration, that receiving phone calls about Hillwood Street. It runs parallel to Union Avenue and it crosses Webster. And I guess the cars are coming into Cranston from Providence. They're using Union and they're cutting through. There's a side street that connects Hillwood to Union, and the residents are saying that they're using it as a cut through and they're speeding. So I don't know if we can address that somehow by, I don't know, putting up a barrier on the street or something, but they're very concerned there. But that's something we need to discuss.
Yeah, I can at least get patrol over there to at least have the presence of police a little more often.
There's little children too.
Yeah, if you could give me the street along Hillwood.
Hillwood runs parallel to Union.
Right.
Then when you get to the Providence side, there's a side street. There's a gas station, there's a street that connects both of them.
Okay.
And they're using that as a cut through, so they don't want to drive in the traffic at Union, or they bypass the light there.
So they cut across to Hillwood. Okay.
And the next is, any news of community block grants? Have we received any?
I believe we got our funding, we got full funding. In fact, I think we got a little more money this year than last year.
Do we have an amount that we received?
Just over $1 million and
What are
change.
the plans for that money? Can we have a breakdown of where that money's going?
Yeah, I could get you that budget from Stephanie.
Can you send me an email? That'd be great. All right, thank you so much.
Actually, send me an email to remind me, please, and I'll make sure. Send me an email to remind me.
Okay, I will.
I'll make sure.
Thank you.
If I don't
Thank
see
you,
you guys, I
Director.
don't remember.
Councilman McCauley.
Thank you, Council President. Director Muskin already touched on it. This is no reflection on the police. They do a great job of notification of the release of sex offenders, but we found 501 Reservoir Avenue is becoming a frequent location for upon their release. And I've been informed by many constituents in that area that they're concerned because of the close proximity of school bus stops, and I'm just asking if the police would just monitor it.
Absolutely.
If you'd be nice enough to pass that on.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. My second is, I've been working with the gentleman that spoke earlier, Ray, as far as Norfolk Street and some kind of a solution we can come up with. I know it is affecting his business, and his business has been around for many, many years. What I did this past Saturday, September 22nd, I walked Norfolk Street and knocked on each door to get their feeling about making this, returning this back to two-way. And there were a great many people that were against it, more than I thought. So what I would like to do is see if we can send this to Public Works to come up with something that's maybe viable for Ray's business, maybe an access point for his area so he can get that parking that he so needs so much, and keep that rest continue to be one way. Because I have the votes. I mean, it's easy for me to decide something that doesn't affect me. So I thought the best thing was to talk to the people that this would affect, and it was quite remarkable. I had 18 people against, and I had 6 for. So it was, I don't mean to bring this bad news out, but I wanted to do my due diligence, sir, at the same time, and certainly get your concerns on the docket. So what I would ask the body to do is allow this to go to Public Works and see if we can come up with some kind of signage or some kind of way to help you and also keep the neighborhood safe. So with that, I ask permission to send this to committee.
I believe it's on as new business, so it'll go to committee when we do the main vote.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Ray.
Councilman Velazquez, what do you got?
I just have a follow-up. Maybe the traffic engineer can take a look at that road and maybe come up with a solution that helps everybody?
Yeah, I would like to do that as well. I mean, you can still move forward to Public Works as an ordinance, but if in the meantime we have the traffic engineer look at it, that might make that a moot point, and then just have sign ordinances come in. Not to age myself, I think I was actually here when it got made into a one-way. I think it was back, I think it was in the last week. And it was a discussion of discussions.
Right.
And so I'm not surprised that we're hearing both sides, and I'm not surprised that the neighbors don't want it to go back.
Yeah.
I do think that we certainly can look at access to that parking lot. Maybe there's a way to do a different curb cut somewhere, and work with your business, sir, to try to do something.
Actually, most of our parking, you can get 9 about 15 spots to drive down the road.
Yep.
You can't drive down the road, you can't access the property. If you have to close the business, my property's like closed, I can't even sell to the modified business, you can't access. So it's really important to have some sort of legal access.
Understood. And we'll see if we can come up with some solution.
Councilman Velazquez, the floor is still yours.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. On another topic, I was informed that some trash cans are missing in Knightsville, city trash cans. We had one in front of the church and one, can you find out if they've been stolen or if they've been moved somewhere else?
We'll find out where. Send me the emails, please, but I will find out.
I like trash cans in Knightsville. We need the
Missing trash cans, the great mystery of Cranston.
Thank you.
Councilman Brady, you're up.
Thank you, Council President. I just had a couple updates. Specifically, I'd like to start with some residents of Ward 1. Prior to being a councilman, I was working with the Orlando Dream Center, and we helped fix up the Beachmont basketball courts. We started the project of the dog park. A lot of residents of that area have wondered, and I worked with Councilman Stikos in the process about when the dog park would be opened. I'd like to report that we've raised enough money and there will be seeding and weeding it this week. So that'll be done, and hopefully upon the grass growing in the coming month, now it's season to obviously seed the ground. That dog park would be successfully open. In addition to that, I wanted to commend a couple local business owners at 915 and 875 Oakland Ave. They've made a tremendous investment into those buildings, but in addition to that, the bike path, the wall was starting to fall over in that area, and they made a sizable investment to make that area look a lot greater if you've driven by. That's the Mike Fury and the Silvestri family. And last but not least, I was vacationing in Newport on Sunday, and I noticed that they had a lot of permanent speed signs that flashed, especially specifically around schools. I know this council gets a lot of emails regarding speeding amongst the city, and it seems to be that the biggest is, obviously we've talked about speed humps and things of that nature, but, we've all requested for the most part those speed signs be brought into our ward. I think the issue is we don't have enough of them to give them to our residents, so if there's a way that we can look into the cost of these, like Mr. Stikos has said in the past, and maybe put some money aside in the budget to do that in the future, that would be greatly appreciated. I'm sure amongst many of our residents, especially those on Oak Road.
Thank you,
Council President Barry. Northeast Street, Director Martinez is important, but I know we've discussed a similar issue with our but mulch flying, being vulnerable to people's schools and other property. Is that a state issue?
This all falls under that farm statute. It's a farm. Now, the spirit of that was out in like Confrida Farm, where that's where it's supposed to be. But when the landscaping companies fell under this farming statute, it allowed this tremendous amount of latitude. And this is why, with all due respect to the people in Edgewood, we're desperately trying to say, talk to your state reps about this. Because that legislation needs to be addressed. It really is not the spirit of farming.
So we need to get something submitted up to the legislature, basically. Really took things like the safety report I was issued to the school council and the school committee, the tech one.
Should one of the committees, since you were the chair, as opposed to calling a special, I'll leave it up to you if you want to call a special meeting the night of your finance committee meeting, or if you just want to release it to the finance committee and invite the members of the committee to your finance committee.
That would be fine.
That probably is the best, that we don't have to have, we're all in meeting paralysis, we will have a meeting, so I would invite the members of the commission to your meeting to present the report as a group.
And that's fine. And lastly, just maybe I might committee an update on the digital electronic filing and electronic access to records that we maybe find order.
That's the second step. The first step we have to go online.
Right, but there was an issue with the...
No, that's the second phase. I mean, that's putting cart before the horse. We have to get the records online, and the company was checking with their people to see if it's going to be possible to accomplish that by the end of the year, which is what I wanted to do.
Madam Clerk, we will make mention of the fact that...
Council Vice President, why don't you just add as an update?
Yeah, I just want to ask some questions on that.
There's no further council communications. New business. Old business, new business, Madam.
Proposed ordinance 9-1801 authorizing the city to utilize Western Police and Apache for the rehabilitation of the police training complex, sponsored by the mayor, and be referred to the finance committee for a hearing on October 1st. Actually, all of the ordinances this evening are being referred to finance for hearing on October 1st. Proposed ordinance 9-1802, amendment Title 2 of the Code of the City of Cranston, 2005, entitled Administration of Personnel, Repeal of Police Injured on Duty Disability Pension Entitlement, sponsored by the mayor. Proposed ordinance 9-1803, amendment Title 2 of the Code of the City of Cranston, 2005, entitled Administration of Personnel, Repeal of Firefighters Injured on Duty Disability Pension Entitlement, sponsored by the mayor. Proposed ordinance 9-1804, ratifying, confirming, and approving the lease agreement between the City of Cranston and the MS Dream Center, sponsored by the mayor. Proposed ordinance 9-1805, ratifying the Teamsters, Chauffeurs, Warehouse, and the Helpers of America, Local Union 251, municipal employees, the fiscal year July 1, 2018 through June 30, 2018. 2021, sponsored by the mayor. The following two requests for poll locations to be referred to Public Works for hearing on October 11th, a joint poll at Hope Road, and a new joint poll location in Whalen Downtown. And that is open for business.
Motion send the business to the appropriate commission. Second. Motion and a second. To discussion. Seeing none. Clerk, please take the roll.
Yes.
Yes.